You can't even do simple housework anymore. You're useless to us. I agree. Let's fire this housekeeper already. Finally, I can get rid of this old hag. These cruel words come from my husband, mother-in-law, and daughter. I'm sitting in a wheelchair while they stand in front of me, smirking, waiting for me to react. If you're going to treat me like this, I won't hold back anymore. You'll regret it, I say firmly. My name is Anna Taylor, and I'm 30 years old. I work as a freelance writer from home and also take care of the household. I got married 2 years ago and now live with my husband Jared, his teenage daughter Maya, and my mother-in-law. Jared is 5 years older than me. We met 3 years ago through a dating app and hit it off quickly since we both love movies. 6 months after we started dating, he proposed, and we got married soon after. However, there was one big challenge in our marriage, Maya. She's Jared's daughter from his previous marriage. When we got married, she was 10 years old, now a teenager. She doesn't accept me and seems to hate me. At first, she ignored me whenever I tried to talk to her. Now, she openly mocks me. For example, one day, she came home from after-school activities and threw her gym clothes at me. I need these tomorrow, so wash them, she demanded. Confused, I said, don't you have another set? These won't dry in time even if I wash them now. But she yelled, shut up and do it. If it's not ready tomorrow morning, I'll tell Dad and Grandma. Good luck. Then, she stormed off to her room. I ended up taking her clothes to the laundromat that evening. As I stood there waiting for them to dry, I felt a deep sense of sadness. I knew blending into this family would be hard, but I never imagined it would hurt this much. Maya, will you ever treat me normally? Even if I can't be your mother, I just want us to have a regular conversation, I thought to myself. Still, I tried to stay positive, hoping things would eventually improve. But Maya isn't my only problem. My mother-in-law dislikes me just as much. She's been cold toward me since the beginning of my marriage. When I returned home from the laundromat that night, she was waiting at the door. Where have you been? Why isn't dinner ready? She scolded. I'm sorry, the side dish is ready. I'll prepare the rest now, I replied. Don't make excuses. Were you out wasting time? She snapped. No, I had to take Maya's gym clothes to the laundromat, I explained. Oh, so now you're blaming Maya? You really love shifting the blame, don't you? I tried to defend myself, but she dismissed me. Just get dinner ready, Jared will be home soon, and Maya must be hungry. Yes, ma'am, I said quietly and went to the kitchen. This kind of treatment is common. My mother-in-law blames me for everything, no matter how small. It used to make me cry when I was newly married, but I've learned to tolerate it. Still, the emotional scars remain. What hurt me the most was being compared to my husband's ex-wife. Her name was Michelle, and my mother-in-law often compared me to her, saying things like, Michelle could have done this better. Michelle's cooking was delicious. She was a kind and caring wife. I wish Michelle would come back. According to Jared, Michelle cheated on him, which led to their divorce. I know my mother-in-law loves Jared deeply, so I don't understand why she keeps praising the woman who caused the divorce. If someone hurt my beloved child, I would probably dislike them, but I can't focus on that right now. I need to figure out how to get along with my mother-in-law and Maya. How can I live in this house and handle these relationships every day? It's hard, and it feels like a lot of pressure, but I'm determined to do my best for my husband, whom I love. I didn't complain to Jared about his mother or Maya. Instead, I asked him for advice on how we could get along better. One evening, I sat down with him and said, Jared, are you listening? Your mom and Maya scolded me again today. He barely looked up from his phone and replied, I'm listening. I keep telling you not to worry about them. I know, but we're living together now. We need to figure out how to get along. You should think about that too, I said, trying to make him understand. Still not looking away from his phone, he replied lazily. That's when I asked him seriously, please, I need your advice on this. I get it, they don't like me, but your mom keeps comparing me to Michelle. You know Michelle, right? She says Michelle was a better wife than me. She's always saying that. You need to understand how it feels from my side. I really want to have a good relationship with her. Jared replied, well, it'll work out eventually. Time will sort it out. That's not helpful. That's nonsense. I'm being serious here. He said, just try to get along with my mom and Maya, put in the effort, and it will work out. Jared patted my shoulder and said, good night, then pulled the covers over himself. I wasn't sure if he was actually asleep or just pretending. No matter how much I called his name, He didn't respond. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, Maya came down from her room. I handed her the gym clothes she had asked for. Here you go, Maya. These are the gym clothes you wanted from yesterday. Are you listening to me? I asked. Maya took the clothes and said, these are from yesterday. Shut up. I hear you. I'm ignoring you on purpose. Don't you get it? Ignore me? Couldn't you at least talk to me? What, you want me to say thank you or something? Maya sighed and grabbed the clothes from my hands. You're so annoying. You act like you're my mom. You shouldn't have married Dad. That's too much, Maya. Ugh, you're so irritating. You always make me so mad in the morning. I can't stand it. She didn't touch the breakfast I made but ate the bread my mother-in-law had bought. Then she made her grandmother go out to buy more food before leaving for school. I went to see her off, but she didn't even acknowledge me. I thought about eating the leftover breakfast, but when I got to the living room, I saw the dishes I had made were gone. Where are my dishes? I asked in confusion. Behind me, I heard a small laugh. It was my mother-in-law, smiling. Did you do this? Yes, it looked so bad, and Maya didn't want it, so I threw it away. Why would you do that? Terrible? You're the one who can only cook such bad food. It's your fault. No matter how much I tried to defend myself, my mother-in-law kept insulting me, attacking me without stopping. Later, she followed me to the grocery store, and a few hours after that, I had the worst experience of my life. On my way home from shopping, I got into an accident. I was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, and the doctors told me that my right leg was paralyzed. I would need a wheelchair for a while. Though my life wasn't at risk, I was hospitalized for a few days. The hospital must have contacted my family, because soon after, Jared, my mother-in-law, and Maya came to visit. I was in a wheelchair, and they stood in front of me. Did they come because they were worried? I was happy to see them and said, thank you all so much for coming. Will your leg heal? Jared asked, looking concerned. I smiled, though my heart wasn't in it. The doctor said it might get a little better, but I'll probably never walk without help again. I see. Well, I guess there's nothing we can do, Jared said, his tone changing. What do you mean? Thank you for everything, Anna. Thank you? Jared looked at me with a strange smile, and I felt confused, unsure of what he meant. He went on, it was short, but I'm glad I married you. You did all the housework and took care of everything without complaining. You also gave us a lot of money to live on. What are you talking about? The atmosphere in the room had shifted. They were all smiling, but there was something unsettling about it. I could see it in their faces. As I sat in my wheelchair, feeling small in front of my husband, mother-in-law, and daughter, they each spoke in turn. You can't even do housework anymore. You're useless to us now, my husband said coldly. I agree. It's time to fire this housekeeper, my mother-in-law added. Finally, I can say goodbye to this old hag, Maya shouted, with no care in the world. The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze in shock. My legs shook with fear. Looking down at me, my husband gave his final blow. I married you to take care of the house. Now that you're in a wheelchair, you're no longer of any use to me. I couldn't believe it. Does this mean divorce? Thanks for taking care of everything. As soon as you leave the hospital, pack up your things and leave our house, he said. He pulled out the divorce papers, already filled out with his part, and slapped them down in front of me. Without waiting for a response, they turned and walked out of the room. The door closed behind them, and I could still hear their footsteps and laughter fading away. That was the moment I knew for sure. He never truly liked me. He married me to take care of his daughter, and that was all. I would never forgive any of them. I signed the divorce papers immediately and called my mother to explain everything. I asked her to take the papers to the city office for me. A few days later, after being discharged from the hospital, I left for my parents' house. I asked my parents to tell my in-laws that I had filed for divorce and to pack up my things. I went straight to my parents' house, telling myself I'd never see them again. I felt a bit relieved and decided to start a new life. 5 years later, I saw a familiar name, Jared, on my phone. I had forgotten to block his number. I didn't answer the call and deleted his contact from my phone. The next day, my former family showed up at my parents' house. When they saw me, they all dropped to their knees. Confused, I wondered what was going on. Then Jared suddenly looked up and started speaking. Please help us. What? What do you mean? Why are you asking me now? Anna, you're the only one I can rely on. What's going on? I need you to lend us some money, we can't survive without it. To summarize, Jared explained that for a while after I left, they had been living comfortably, but when Maya started private high school, things got tight financially. The problem was Maya had been stealing money from the house to buy whatever she wanted. On top of that, Jared's mother was using him to pay for her beauty treatments and luxury items. When their savings ran out, they started borrowing money but couldn't pay it back, so no one would lend them more. Now, the biggest issue was Maya's tuition. Her grades were so bad, she was close to being expelled, and they had to pay extra to keep her in school. Jared lowered his head to the ground, tears in his eyes, as he finished explaining. Please, please, you must have made a lot of money by now. I'm begging you, even just a little, please lend us some. His mother and Maya were also bowing, begging. I was disgusted. 5 years ago, they kicked me out after treating me horribly. Now they came back to me when they needed money. I could tell they were still just using me. I was so angry that, without thinking, I turned on the full set of the front door and sprayed them with water. What the hell are you doing? All three of them screamed at me again. Hey, what are you doing? It's freezing. Don't get carried away, you old hag. We're begging you for help. This is not how you ask for help. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I said what I had been feeling all along. Rely on me? I never asked you to rely on me. You used me when it was convenient. And now you want me to help you because you're in trouble? That's rich. How much more are you going to mock me? What? How dare you talk to me like that? We're in serious trouble. I don't care. I don't care if you're starving or what happens to you. Honestly, I'm glad you're struggling. You deserve this. I will never help you. Just deal with your mess yourselves. After that, I slammed the door hard. I locked it and cut them off completely. They stayed outside for a while, yelling and complaining. A neighbor, unable to stand it any longer, called the police. They were taken away for causing a disturbance. The news spread around the neighborhood, and eventually, it reached Jared's workplace. Embarrassed by the gossip, he ended up resigning. Since they couldn't pay Maya's school fees, she was forced to drop out. Now, the three of them are all working to pay off their debts. They still seem to cooperate, but whenever they get together, they blame each other for their problems. Their family bond is falling apart. From my perspective, that's exactly what they deserve. As for me, I'm still working from home, supported by my parents. My leg has improved, and I'm going through rehab to make a full recovery. I'm so grateful to my parents for taking me in after my divorce. From now on, I'm going to live my life to the fullest, for my parents and for myself.
Hey everyone, I'm Emma. If you have a minute, I have a story that's quite a roller coaster, filled with love, betrayal, and a fight for dignity. Before we get into the details, let me introduce the main characters in my little drama. It starts with me, Emma. I was born into what many would call a privileged life, with a silver spoon and all that. But despite the easy start, I was taught to value hard work over handouts. My dad is a big deal in the engine additive world, a self-made man who built an empire. My mom isn't any less impressive. She created a beauty salon empire from scratch, becoming synonymous with style. They divorced when I was 19, but they did it amicably, splitting everything equally and staying friends. Dad stayed single, focused on his business, while mom remarried but didn't have any more kids. Then there's Jake, my husband, who I now see as the catalyst for my personal upheaval. We got married right after I graduated from college and started teaching music to kids. Life seemed great until we hit a rough patch. I got pregnant, and suddenly Jake's true colors started to show. One lazy Sunday, as he lounged on the couch, Jake casually dropped a bombshell. "Emma, babe, why don't you just quit your job and stay home with the baby? We'll manage." I almost choked on my tea. Quit my job? Jake, you know we can't afford that on your salary alone. Plus, I love my work. He waved a hand dismissively, a smirk playing on his lips. Come on, Em, it's not like we're ordinary folks. Your dad's loaded. A little help from him, and we're golden. I felt my blood boil. That's not the point, Jake. I'm not tapping into my parents' wealth for our day-to-day expenses. We agreed to live within our means. But Jake wouldn't let it go. Over dinner, in front of his parents no less, he brought it up again. Emma's considering taking some time off work, with the baby coming and all. His mom, Carol, a woman with a sharp tongue and a knack for finding advantages, jumped in. "Oh, that's wonderful. With Emma's family, you two don't have to worry about a thing." I clenched my fork a little tighter, trying to keep my cool. "Actually, we haven't decided anything, and we intend to manage on our own. Thank you." Jake's dad, Frank, never one to miss a beat, chimed in with a chuckle. "Why play the hard way, Emma? A little help from your folks and you could be living easy. Why waste that opportunity?" The conversation spiraled from there, with Jake and his parents painting grand pictures of a life lived on my parents' dime. Every word felt like a betrayal, twisting the knife a bit deeper. They didn't see me. They saw a ticket to an easy life. That night, lying in bed next to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. "Jake, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that?" I whispered, hoping for some sign I'd misread the situation. He rolled over, facing me with those eyes that once melted my heart. "Emma, it's not about need. It's about what's smart. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take it?" Deserve. That word echoed in my head long after Jake had drifted off to sleep. It was clear we were on different paths, with different values. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs and where we went from here. After that first clash with Jake about money and pride, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to the same page. Oh, was I wrong? Enter the in-laws. Stage left, with their own special brand of chaos. Jake's parents weren't exactly the poster children for self-reliance. They had a knack for sniffing out a free meal from miles away, and my family's wealth was like a beacon to them. One evening, we're all sitting around our cramped living room, and Frank's going on about this new business opportunity that just needed a small investment to get off the ground. "So, Emma, darling," Carol starts, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that could give you cavities. "With your family's resources, I bet you could easily help us out. It's such a sure thing." Tried to keep my cool. Really, I did. "Carol, Frank, I've told you before, we're managing our finances independently. My parents' money isn't part of this equation." "But Frank, oh, he's got the persistence of a door-to-door salesman." "Come on, Emma, it's not like you feel it. What's a few thousand to your dad? He probably spends that on golf in a weekend." The audacity floored me. Here they were, sitting in our home, eating our food, and they had the guts to treat my family's hard-earned money like it was theirs for the taking. Jake tried to play mediator. Maybe they have a point. It's just a loan, right? We could help out family." "Family?" I nearly choked on the word. "Jake, when did we decide it's our job to bankroll your parents' dreams?" The room went ice cold. Carol, not one to let a moment of drama go by unexploited, piped up. "Well, I never. Here we thought family helped each other out. But if you're going to be stingy." Stingy. Now I was seeing red. Working for what you have isn't being stinky, Carol. It's called being responsible. Maybe you should try it sometime. Frank tried to smooth things over. "Look, Emma, no need to get upset. We're just talking here." Talking, right? I couldn't hide my sarcasm. "Seems like all we ever do is talk about how my family can solve your problems." That night, after they finally left with Jake apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-on invasion of our lives by two people who saw me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a walking, talking ATM. After our little Lily came into this world, life took a turn I didn't quite expect. You'd think the arrival of a grandchild would bring out the best in people, right? Well, not so much with Jake's folks. They showed up at the hospital with what had to be the cheapest onesie from the discount bin. It still had the clearance sticker on it. But when my folks came through with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and some top-notch baby gear, you'd have thought World War AA was about to break out in that hospital room. Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they? Carol quipped, eyeing the gifts with a mix of disdain and envy. Must be nice to just throw money around. Bet they could have just gotten you a house instead of all this fluff. Jake chimed in with a chuckle. Yeah, Mom's got a point. Your folks sure don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh? My heart sank. Here I was, holding our newborn, and all they could talk about was how my parents should have spent their money. It stunned hearing Jake echo his mom's words. Was our daughter just a dollar sign to them? To keep the peace, biting back my growing anger. Well, it's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts. But Frank wasn't about to let it go. Oh, sure. But when you think about it, a nice little investment in property, that's a gift that keeps on giving. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Jake tried to smooth things over, saying his parents were just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. But the seed was planted. Doubt started creeping in about why Jake really married me. Was it love? Or was my family's bank account the main attraction? A few weeks later, during one of their unsolicited visits, Carol brought it up again. We were all crammed in our living room, Lily fussing in my arms, and Carol couldn't resist a jab at the new stroller my mom had bought us. Must be nice having your folks shower Lily with all these expensive toys and gadgets. Though a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful. Don't you think? She said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive tone I'd come to dread. Jake, sitting beside his mom, nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking. Maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right? I was floored. Not only were Jake's parents relentless, after our daughter was born, it felt like she became a bargaining chip for financial gain. It seemed like love and family meant less than money. Asked Jake, is that what this is about for you, using my parents for money? I couldn't hide how hurt I was. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Jake looked surprised, but Carol just sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are rich, it's only practical to think about these things. After they finally left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling with Lily asleep beside me. It hit me hard. My marriage, my family. It all felt like a transaction to them, and I was the currency. The last few years have been a roller coaster. Lily has grown into a lively 3-year-old, but life has thrown us some unexpected challenges. First, there was Mom. Her accident was sudden and shocking. I was drowning in grief, barely holding it together for Lily. But Jake's first question wasn't about how I was coping. He asked, "So, how much are you getting from your mom's will?" It felt like a slap in the face. According to Mom's will, I inherited the beauty salon chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Jake was quick to offer his help. "Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business," he said, all confidence and smiles. I was too lost in my grief to argue, so I let him take charge, though I made sure the ownership papers stayed in my name. Barely a year later, Dad passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short time broke something in me. I needed Jake more than ever, but all he could talk about was what we'd inherited from Dad. The day after Dad's death, Jake's parents came over. I expected some decency, some respect for my loss, but no. They dived straight into speculations about Dad's wealth. "So, Emma, must be a hefty sum coming your way." "Huh?" Frank said, barely able to contain his glee. I saw red. "Can you not, for once, just stop talking about money?" I shouted, the words exploding out of me like shrapnel. Carol put on her best offended face. Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude. Jake tried to play peacemaker as always. And they're just curious. It's a big deal, you know. A big deal. I echoed, my voice rising. My parents are gone, Jake, and all you and your parents can think about is cashing in. Is that all I am to you? A bank? The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked at me, then at his parents, and mumbled some half-hearted apology. But the damage was done. I couldn't stand the sight of them, their greed, their complete lack of empathy. Get out, I said, my voice steady, but I cut him off, my voice cold and unwavering. Leave? Now. Carol muttered under her breath, and Frank scowled as they left. Jake lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior, but I was done listening. 2 days after my dad died, Jake came bouncing through the doorway earlier than usual. Babe, I've got awesome news. He beamed, barely containing his excitement. I've struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it? My jaw nearly hit the floor. What? You did what? Without even asking me. I was fuming, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Before we could really dive into it, his folks showed up, ready to party like we'd hit the jackpot. They brought in a feast from some fancy restaurant and a bunch of bottles that screamed high roller. Carol was all smiles, waving those bottles in my face. Guess what, honey? We've sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast. I stared at her, feeling like I was trapped in some bad dream. Hold on, you what? Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach with all that humidity and the winds with a kid. Are you out of your mind? Carol just waved off my concerns like I was talking about the weather. Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous. Where's this money coming from? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it. Yachts, private jets. We're living the dream. Carol's eyes were practically sparkling with dollar signs. I turned to Jake, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? Babe, it makes sense. Managing both businesses will be too much. We've got to focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The greed, the audacity. It was all too much. Show me the financials for the salon, I demanded. I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions. Jake squirmed, avoiding eye contact. Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable. His parents joined the chorus, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But looking at them all, I could see where vultures circling. Why the rush to sell the hairdresser shops again? I pressed, needing answers. Jake shrugged. The picture of Fox reason. Look, babe, after your dad's gone, juggling both businesses just doesn't make sense. We've got to focus on what brings in more dough. The car oil business is a gold mine compared to the salons. His folks perked up at this, chiming in with their 2 cents. Darling, think about it. Selling those little shops could give you a life of luxury. Why waste your time on them? His mom said, her voice dripping with greed. The sight of them practically salivating over my inheritance made my skin crawl. I want you to leave now, I said, my voice firm, my resolve stronger. This is a time to mourn my father, not feast on what he left behind. Jake tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. Another thing, Jake, this is my inheritance we're talking about. Mine. You and your parents have no say in this. The air turned icy as they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. With heavy steps and heavier skulls, they left, leaving me to ponder the lonely battle ahead. The dawn after my father's funeral found me in a fog of grief. The world around me dulled to a monotonous gray. That's when Jake decided to inject his version of color back into our lives. Over a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, he launched into his agenda. "We need to call a meeting with the founders of your father's company. Pronto," Jake stated, his voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. I paused, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth, and stared at him. "Jake, my father has just been buried. Can't this wait? I need some time to process everything." He waved off my concerns with a flick of his hand. "Time is money, babe. We need to act fast." Frustrated and seeking clarity, I reached out to our family lawyer, asking for a breakdown of the beauty salon chain's status and a primer on my father's business dealings. I hoped this information would give me some ground to stand on. A month went by in a blur of legal jargon and financial statements until Jake, accompanied by his parents, descended upon our house once more, each of them bursting with unsolicited advice and greed-laden suggestions. Without so much as a hello, Jake dove right in. "You know, Em, I've been thinking I'm the right man to lead your dad's company." The audacity of his claim left me speechless, but he wasn't done. "And I'll need a new car, something that screams business mobile. The latest BMW should do the trick." Before I could even muster a response, Carol chimed in with her own outrageous demands. "The coastal house is nearly ready. We just need to throw in another $300,000 plus some for furniture. And dear, I expect you to set up an account for me. I need to maintain my lifestyle. After all, after listening to their endless demands, I knew what I had to do. It was like a switch flipped inside me. No more Mrs. Nice Girl. Clutching the divorce papers like a shield, I stepped forward, interrupting their chatter. "Jake, we need to talk," I announced, placing the papers before him on the coffee table. He picked them up, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this?" His attempt at nonchalance couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Divorce papers," I stated, every word deliberate. "I've had the business audited, Jake. You've run it into the ground. It's teetering on the edge of ruin because of your management." His face drained of color, like a guilty child caught in a lie. "I was trying to make it better," he stammered, his excuses as flimsy as his confidence. "Make it better by firing our most talented staff and neglecting the core of what made the business succeed." My voice rose, fueled by a cocktail of anger and betrayal. Carol, ever the meddler, couldn't resist intervening. "Now, dear, let's remember he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no joy in it. "Nice try, but everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room went silent. They were stunned, their grand schemes shattering around them. "And another thing," I added, staring Jake down. "You're going to pay back every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce finally hit Jake, his reaction was to desperately grovel, pleading with me to reconsider. "Please, can't we talk about this? There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. His parents, not to be outdone in the drama department, launched into their own tearful performance. They lamented about sinking all their funds into the coastal house, a property now hanging by a thread without the next installment. "We're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, her tears flowing freely. "Please, think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their previous actions, feeling nothing but a detached coldness towards their plight. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I stated, my tone unwavering with a newfound resolve. I guided them to the door, closing it and that chapter of my life behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't allow myself to dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future. Selling the apartment that Jake and I once shared provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly but surely. When they finally caught up with Jake, he was ordered to compensate for the turmoil he'd inflicted on the hairdresser chain. The courts determined that his recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him be held accountable for once felt like bittersweet vindication for the hardship he put us through. One day, out of nowhere, my phone rang. On the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice laced with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place. Any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts before responding. "You make your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. "It's time you lied in it." Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me, anger at their continued sense of entitlement, but also a profound sense of freedom from their clutches. After everything that went down with the divorce and wrestling back control over my mom's hairdresser chain, life finally started to brighten up again. It was a tough climb, but gradually the salons began to find their old spark. Bringing back those top stylists we'd lost felt like a victory parade. Watching them walk back through those doors, ready to bring their magic back to our chairs, was like watching the place come alive again. Turns out I was more cut out for the business world than I'd ever imagined. Each day was a new lesson, a new surprise about what I could achieve. If it hadn't been for being cornered by life's cruel twists, I might never have uncovered this side of me. Handling my dad's car oil business was another mountain to climb. For now, I decided to bring in a manager to steer the ship while I got my bearings. "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," I told him, making it clear I was still in charge. "Once Lily's old enough, maybe around 20, I'm thinking of passing it to her if she's interested. I want her to have options to choose her path. Meanwhile, I'm dipping my toes into it, learning the ropes." Our new home, just me and Lily, was a haven of peace, a world away from the turmoil we'd left behind. It was small, sure, but it was ours, a place where we could grow, heal, and build something new. Every corner filled with laughter, every nook cradling a memory we were making together. Out in the garden, Lily's laughter was a balm to my soul. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she'd say, her eyes alight with wonder and admiration. "You're going to be even more amazing," I'd respond, pulling her into a hug. I knew deep down that we were on the brink of something wonderful. Together, we were unstoppable, ready to meet whatever the future held with open arms and hopeful hearts. You think you're being bullied by your mom, but it's all in your head, right? Mom is just teaching you how to be a proper daughter-in-law, but you're so good at playing the victim. These were the words my husband Steve said when I told him about the harassment from my mother-in-law, Pamela. She throws away the meals I make and drops the laundry I hung out on the ground. To Steve, that seems like educating a daughter-in-law. Seeing me speechless, Steve just laughed mockingly and then said something unbelievable. "My name is Laura. I'm 28 and work as an office worker at a pharmaceutical company. Steve was a college friend, and we got married 3 years ago. I lost my parents around the same time I graduated from college. It was so sudden, and as an only child, I felt doomed to a lifetime of loneliness. My parents didn't have much interaction with relatives, so mostly their acquaintances and friends attended the funeral. Without time to grieve, I started working at the company where I was hired as a new grad and met Steve through a friend. Out of pity for me losing my parents, Steve often took me to his parents' house from the beginning of our relationship. His parents welcomed me like their own daughter, and I never doubted our good relationship, even after marriage, often enjoying my mother-in-law's cooking. I wanted to continue working even after having children. If I couldn't leave our future children at daycare, there would be no one to help me with parenting since I lost my parents. When I shared this concern with Steve, he said, "Cram will take care of it," and things went smoothly. I ended up living with Pamela at my in-laws' house. My father-in-law was away on a job assignment, so it was just me, Steve, and Pamela living there. Things were fine at first, but after 3 years of living with my in-laws and not being able to conceive, Pamela's attitude towards me changed noticeably. She would say, "Laura, how many times do I have to tell you? You're the youngest in this house, so you should do the housework." On weekends, Pamela would always push her cleaning and laundry onto me. Even though I was living in their house and doing most of the household chores, Pamela just didn't seem to like me. She would purposefully drop my freshly laundered clothes in the yard and dirty the wash dishes, making me wash them again. She constantly nagged me over trivial things and lectured me about not being able to provide grandchildren yet. I was already feeling broken inside, and Steve's lack of understanding made it worse. I repeatedly told Steve about Pamela's harassment and insults, but his response was always, "You're imagining things, overthinking it." At that time, Pamela never harassed me in front of Steve, so maybe he couldn't believe his mother would do such awful things. But even without that, Steve's attitude was unacceptable. It was as if Pamela was the victim and I was the villain, making me realize I had no allies in my in-laws' house. Once Steve showed he didn't believe me, Pamela's harassment intensified. What used to be done behind Steve's back now happened even in front of him, like verbal abuse and harassment. Finally became pregnant around this time, but even as the tough period of morning sickness passed and I entered a stable phase, my heart wasn't light. Going on maternity leave and being constantly subjected to Pamela's relentless harassment, and Steve not only disbelieving me but joining Pamela in belittling me were the main reasons. Even Steve, who was so happy when he first found out about the pregnancy, now joined Pamela in calling me a woman who does nothing but eat and sleep. I knew stress was bad for the baby, but I saw no solution. Despite the situation, the only person I could turn to for help was Steve. I decided to have a serious talk with him, recounting all the mistreatment from Pamela and hoping for a change in his condescending attitude for the sake of our unborn child. I picked a weekend and approached Steve, who was relaxing in the living room. "Hey, there's something I want to talk about." As I said that, Steve lazily lifted his face from his mobile phone. "Lately, both you and Pamela have been really cruel to me, and when Pamela harasses me, you just ignore it and pretend it's not happening. Can you stop doing that?" Steve, seemingly unsure whether to listen or not, stared blankly into the distance, then mockingly focused back on me. "That's just you overreacting. What Mom does isn't harassment or anything." "How can you say that? Throwing away the food I make without touching it, deliberately littering my room, isn't that harassment? Maybe Mom is just trying to educate you to be a proper daughter-in-law. Why can't you understand that?" Steve's words made my vision blur with disbelief. I unconsciously placed my hand on my stomach and looked down. There's no way I can raise a child in this awful in-laws house. Steve and Pamela's mindset will definitely have a bad influence on the child. Maybe it's normal for you and Pamela, but it's hard for me. I'm at my limit. My hand on my stomach trembled slightly. My anguished cry tore through me, but it didn't reach Steve. All that came back was his mocking laughter. At my breaking point, Steve said, "If it's so bad, why don't you leave? Neither Mom nor I would be troubled by your absence." Steve's unexpected suggestion stopped my thoughts for a moment. But then I exclaimed, "Supporting my belly? What are you saying?" "I'm pregnant, you know." Steve looked at me as if to say, "So what?" and let out a dry laugh. "Huh, that's right. You have nowhere to go if you're kicked out. Poor thing, with no parents or a home to return to, you have no place to rely on." Steve's mocking voice echoed in my ears. I bit my lip and glared at Steve with anger in my eyes. What's with that look? Overwhelmed by my intense gaze, Steve looked slightly displeased. I'm going back to my parents' home, I said. After a moment of silence, Steve burst out laughing. Go back if you can. You'll probably end up sleeping on the streets, talking big about going back to your parents' home. As Steve's laughter continued, I pulled out a large Boston bag from the closet and started packing clothes and valuables. Steve seemed to believe I had no place to go other than his parents' house. He thought that even if I said I would leave out of stubbornness, I'd ultimately have no choice but to return. Pamela, hearing the conversation, came over and said, "It's your fault for not following our house's rules." Like Steve, Pamela seemed to be saying I should leave if I didn't like it. I had no intention of ever returning to my in-laws' house. Once I settled down after leaving, I planned to send divorce papers. After packing, I muttered to Steve and Pamela, still laughing unpleasantly, goodbye. I had decided then to raise this child on my own. They would never see the face of my unborn child. A year has passed since I left the in-laws' house. I successfully gave birth to a girl and am struggling with parenting alone. I haven't returned to the in-laws' house. 3 months after leaving, I sent Steve divorce papers, which were processed without issue. I'd also requested child support at the same time. But Steve hasn't paid child support, so it seems I'll need to talk to a lawyer and negotiate with him in the future. Trying to lift my sinking spirits, I looked up at the towering high-rise in front of me. A sign saying "Model Room Open for Viewing" stood at the entrance, and occasionally other visitors came to look around. I was thinking of buying a condo before returning to work. Where I'm living now is far from both my workplace and the nearest childcare center, making it inconvenient. Considering I'll be raising my child alone, I want to settle down in a fixed place soon. Fortunately, I have ample funds to buy a condo. After registering at the reception on the first floor, I was shown to a room on the top floor. Following the guide, I rode the elevator up. Arriving at the 50th floor, the elevator doors opened, and I was surprised. The person I saw was just as shocked to see me. The employee assigned to guide me turned out to be Steve. He was supposed to be working at a securities firm when we were married. But when did he switch jobs? Steve must have never imagined meeting me here. Clearly unsettled, he was darting his gaze around. Moreover, this was the top floor of an exclusive apartment, accessible only to those with a serious intention to buy. With an awkward smile, Steve began showing me around the top floor. His words were gentle, but his glances kept asking why I was there. We both felt uncomfortable, but the room itself was impeccable. It was close to my workplace and had an underground connection to a childcare center. As expected of a luxury high-rise, it boasted a park in the courtyard and a 24-hour supermarket underground. An ideal environment where I could definitely raise my child on my own. I think I'll take this apartment, I said. Steve was surprised at my decision. I had come prepared to sign a contract immediately if I found a suitable place. However, Steve didn't bring out the contract, no matter how long I waited. Just as I was about to question him, Steve's lips quivered. There's no way. What? A single mom going through a divorce can't afford the top floor of a high rise. Steve's face showed a mix of emotions. His expression, neither anger nor jealousy, seemed accusatory. Did you catch some rich guy, or are you doing some unspeakable job? I stepped back as he closed in. No, I just sold my family home for a bit more than expected. Your family home. And then recounted the events of the past year. After leaving my in-laws, I moved back to my family home, which was in my name. Both my parents had passed, and the house was too large for me alone. The impressive water garden, a hobby of my father's, must have added to its value. Just before the baby was born, Someone wanted to buy it, but that doesn't mean it would sell for enough to buy the top floor of a mansion, right? Steve's skepticism was understandable. The house was old and showing wear. I thought it would only cover living expenses for a while, but the buyer was a well-known, wealthy individual. He was more interested in the water garden than the house itself, offering 5 times the market value for it. I explained that the garden was a hobby, not professionally landscaped, and that I barely maintained it. However, the buyer liked the foundation and planned to have a gardener reshape it to his liking. His willingness to pay so much, even after seeing its current state, led me to sell the house. He even added a living allowance to the price as he felt bad for buying me out. This allowed me to live nearby in an apartment, focusing on childcare without financial worries. Hearing my story, Steve's eyes sparkled briefly, then his attitude changed, and he humbly apologized. "I'm sorry about what happened. Can we start over?" Confidence oozed from Steve's face as if he was sure I wouldn't refuse. But I didn't take his offered hand. "I can raise my child and live well without you. I have no desire to live with someone who looks down on others." At that moment, Steve's face turned to anger. His face reddened as he glared at me. "You're refusing my offer to remarry you?" A colleague with the contract appeared behind Steve, perhaps curious about our long conversation. I glanced past Steve to greet the colleague, but Steve seemed oblivious. A woman being rich is just wrong. Women should just quietly support their men and stay at home. The colleague's face went pale. I silenced his attempt to intervene with a look. "Is that all you wanted to say? So you think you can look down on me now that you're rich? You were better off as a lifetime servant in your husband's house." I sighed and turned to the employee standing frozen with a stack of contracts and documents. "I can't make a big purchase from a company that employs someone who talks like this." At my words, Steve finally turned around. The employee, realizing he was being addressed, rushed over and profusely apologized, almost scattering the documents in his haste. "I'm so sorry. My subordinate was incredibly rude to you." "Come on, you apologize too," urged by his boss. Steve seemed to finally grasp that things were going badly. He apologized repeatedly along with his boss. "Please stop," I commanded. The two hesitantly looked up. "I won't buy it anyway." "I'm sorry, I'll look at other apartments." Their expressions turned to despair at my words. "Wait, I take back everything I said. Just this contract. Do you really think I'd make a deal that benefits you after all you've said?" Steve looked defeated. The outcome was clear. It was a loss for Steve, who knew nothing but to look down on others, and the boss, who probably hoped that our being ex-spouses would smooth things over, hadn't stopped Steve's tirade. I didn't feel much sympathy. I liked everything about the apartment, its location, its layout. But it couldn't be helped. I didn't want to spend my money at a company with such people. Leaving them, I bowed and left the room. No one saw me off as I rode the elevator alone out of the building. I didn't look back as I walked away, searching for another model apartment. Later, I heard through Pamela that Steve had not only lost the big contract for the top floor of the high-rise, but also faced a pay cut and demotion for his verbal abuse towards me, a client, leading to his resignation. After resigning, Steve struggled to find another job, resorting to alcohol and gambling, with Pamela taking care of him. I once met Pamela at the supermarket. "My son isn't working and stays at home taking his anger out on me. I'm sorry for everything. Please remarry him and come back," she pleaded. I quickly responded, "Why don't you leave the house if it's so bad?" Pamela's face fell in despair, and I felt a slight sense of relief. I purchased an apartment in a different building and returned to work after putting my child in childcare. The money from selling my family home was more than enough to raise my child, but I loved my job and was asked to return, so I did. With a recent promotion, I'm now living a fulfilling life, juggling work and childcare. Wow, what are you doing here? I asked as we arrived at the housewarming party for Bertie and his wife. Ashley opened the door and greeted us. Bertie and his wife decided to build a house for their future, and since we're close to them, we helped with the down payment as a sign of support. Ashley knew about this and that we were invited today, but her reaction was surprising. She smirked rudely and said, "Well, if you insist on entering. My name is Susanna, a 46-year-old housewife. I live with my 50-year-old husband, Edwards, and our 25-year-old son, Bertie. Edwards and I have been married for 26 years and still celebrate our anniversaries, maintaining a good relationship. Edwards and Bertie work together at a major automobile company. Bertie introduced us to Ashley, a lovely young woman from his university, and they are planning to marry. We had been worried about Bertie's lack of romantic interest, so we were happy and blessed their union, even though it felt a bit early. Ashley soon joined our household. We lived in a rented house near Edward's parents, but it was cramped for two families. That's why Bertie and his wife started planning to build their own home. We decided to help them with this big step, as we couldn't afford to give them a house like in TV dramas. We wanted to help with the house purchase, so we provided some money for the down payment. At first, Bertie refused, but with our persistence and Ashley's agreement, he accepted our contribution. Ashley was very excited about designing and planning the house. She always seemed happy and in good spirits during the meetings. A few months later, the house Bertie and Ashley bought was finally complete. Thanks to Ashley's planning, the house was finished with all her preferences in mind. Bertie invited us, saying, "We have built a really nice house, and we would love for you to come and see it." So, Edwards and I headed to the new house. Just before we arrived, Bertie messaged us, "I'm out to buy a cake since we forgot one. Ashley's there, so please go in first." I laughed at his usual forgetfulness, but agreed. When we arrived, the gate and garden alone showed that a lot of thought and effort had been put into the house. Even to an amateur, it looked like a well-designed and impressive home. When I rang the doorbell, Ashley answered. From the doorway, I could see vases and a living room sofa from well-known high-end furniture brands. Even though Bertie works for a good company, I couldn't help but worry if they were stretching their budget too much. Ashley opened the door, but she didn't seem welcoming at all. She looked down on us with a creepy smile, seeming like a completely different person from when she lived with us. Her expression had changed dramatically. "What are you here for?" she asked. We were stunned into silence. Ashley sighed and laughed mockingly. When I meekly replied that we were invited, she snorted in displeasure. "If you want to enter so badly, there's an entrance fee of $300, she said, repeating the words entrance fee. Ashley smirked. "Don't you understand? If you want to come into the house, you need to pay. After all, to me, you're just unrelated outsiders. I'm not letting you in for free." Ashley sneered. Edwards and I exchanged glances as she let out a vulgar laugh. Then, with an angry glare, she spat. "Don't act so high and mighty just because you contributed to the down payment. This is our house. I really hate it when outsiders interfere." Ashley's rant left us speechless. It was shocking to be called an outsider by someone we had lived with and considered family. Despite Bertie's initial refusal, it was Ashley who eagerly accepted our generous contribution to the down payment. We never meddled in their house decisions. We just listened as Ashley passionately discussed her preferences. "Are you going to pay or not? I'm busy, so hurry up." "No, we won't pay. Tell Bertie we left," I replied, barely able to think straight. Although Ashley had always said, "Let us properly thank you once the house is complete," her current attitude showed she now saw us as disposable. As we turned to leave, Ashley slammed the door behind us. We sent Bertie a message explaining what happened. It wasn't long before he arrived at our house with Ashley. Bertie apologized profusely as soon as the door opened, while Ashley stood with her arms crossed, looking sullen. "Wait, don't come in here," I said. "Ashley, it's hastily made, so forgive its roughness." I stopped Bertie and Ashley from entering, then presented a piece of paper to Ashley. She read it with a puzzled look. "A contract. Yes, if you insist on charging outsiders an entrance fee, we don't want such a stranger in our home either. We'll waive the past entrance fees during your stay with us. So will you sign this?" Ashley took the pen and chuckled as she signed the handwritten contract. "Do you think this bothers me? I'm rather thankful I won't be paying any entrance fee, so I'll have nothing to do with you all." Bertie held his forehead and looked down as Ashley signed without hesitation. Afterward, Bertie continued apologizing. "Your apologies don't solve anything," Edward said. "Every couple is different, and while I don't want to meddle, Ashley's behavior and your inability to stop it is a problem." Edward's words seemed to hit hard. After that day, Bertie rarely came home. We stayed in touch via phone but never fully cut him off. We had no contact with Ashley, and a year swiftly passed. One day, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Ashley, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. She looked upset and out of breath as if she had hurried over. "Didn't agree to this. What's the meaning of this?" she exclaimed. It turned out we had recently moved. Soon after, we became estranged from Bertie and his wife. A friend of ours, a successful entrepreneur who owned several businesses and properties, approached us to buy their house. They were looking to downsize their assets due to their age. The house, stylish and reflecting our friend's unique taste, was hard to sell despite their other properties selling quickly. It was difficult to let go of this house due to its location and distinctiveness. They implored us to buy it at a bargain price. We had always wanted a detached home, but had given up due to land issues and the fact that Edwards, being the eldest son, would eventually need to care for his parents-in-law. So we had been renting a home near the in-laws. However, the situation changed drastically with Bertie married and out of the house. Edward's siblings agreed to take care of the in-laws, lifting a huge burden from my shoulders. Our friend's vacation home, which we were asked to purchase, wasn't too far from the in-laws. We were familiar with the area and neighbors due to our long friendship. The distinct taste in the home's design didn't bother us, so we decided to buy it. We immediately sent our consent to the friend, who was delighted as they had struggled to find a buyer. They offered us the entire house contents, suggesting we could sell anything that didn't suit our taste to fund new purchases. All the furnishings were from a high-end brand that our friend adored, from sofas to small dishes. Though known for its high cost, a little research showed that the items still fetched a considerable price. We sorted through what we needed and what we didn't, selling some to supplement the home buying funds, and brought in our previous belongings. The move was swift, thanks to our friends and Edward's siblings. The new home, full of unique features, filled us with excitement. We casually informed Bertie about the move. Ashley stood on our doorstep, demanding, "I want this house. Let's swap homes." However, we didn't give out our new address and specifically mentioned to Bertie not to tell Ashley. Despite this, it seems she learned of it from neighborhood gossip and looked up the house herself. The furnishings left by our friend were from the same brand Ashley adored, and she figured this out. We hadn't even given Bertie the new address yet, but Ashley found it on her own. "I had no idea you were moving to such a luxurious house. Those are my favorite brand of furnishings. It's not fair. Swap your house with the one we built. It will surely be better for you," she demanded, making disjointed requests. Ignoring my bewilderment, Ashley tried to forcefully enter the house. In a rush, I presented the contract she had signed earlier. "If you step 1 foot further, you will have to pay." That was the agreement. I said, demanding an entrance fee as she had done to us. Ashley was furious when she realized the hastily signed contract was now binding her just as she had demanded entrance fees from us. I refused her entry until she paid, causing her anger to erupt. She kicked the entrance door and attempted to force her way in, shouting loudly and attracting the neighbors' attention. Amidst the commotion, Bertie arrived running at full speed. "Calm down, Ashley. Making a scene won't help. Let's go back home," he pleaded. Strained by Bertie's calm demeanor, Ashley yelled and hurled insults at me. She glared at Bertie, accusing him childishly of deceit. "You say it too. I married you to live a work-free life surrounded by my favorite brands, not to have in-laws living better than us. If I knew I would be this miserable, I wouldn't have married you," Ashley revealed, her unbelievable thoughts in a tirade. Shocked by her harsh words, we were about to intervene when Bertie gripped her shoulder. His usually mild demeanor was gone, replaced by a stern resolve. "I've been thinking maybe I shouldn't have married you either. We need to talk," he said firmly, dragging the still flailing Ashley back home. Confused by Bertie's uncharacteristic firmness, she was pulled away. I wondered if they would divorce and soon thought it might be for the best. Ashley's rant revealed her shallow intentions. Bertie called later to apologize and within 2 months informed us they were divorcing. It seemed Ashley only valued Bertie for his income, boasting about her influence in their home designs and enduring it as a favor. Despite contemplating immediate divorce, Bertie faced the reality of their new home's mortgage. Bertie insisted Ashley find employment and worked overtime, desperately trying to save up for the divorce. However, Ashley showed no signs of job hunting, instead withdrawing money from Bertie's savings for her shopping. When confronted, she claimed to have earned the money by charging friends an entrance fee to their home, which they paid, mistaking it for a housewarming gift. After repeated demands for entry fees, friends distanced themselves, leaving the house guestless. Ashley then audaciously set up a toll booth outside, demanding passers-by pay to use the road. The police were called after neighborhood complaints, leading to a massive argument between Bertie and Ashley, where she continued to blame everyone else for the situation. Finally, Bertie decided to divorce, deeming further discussion with Ashley futile, and reached out to her parents to explain the situation and his intention to divorce. Ashley's parents were reasonable and understanding individuals. "We are deeply sorry for our daughter's inexcusable behavior." Ashley's parents apologized repeatedly and promptly arranged a meeting to discuss the situation. When Ashley initially lashed out at Bertie upon her parents' unexpected visit, they quickly subdued and reprimanded her. When the topic of divorce was brought up, Ashley became hysterical, but her father restrained her. Her parents agreed to take on the responsibility for the settlement debts and sorting out the new house. Still furious, Ashley was forcibly taken home by her father. "I thought it would be embarrassing to rely on my wife's parents, but if I knew things would settle so quickly, I would have asked them sooner." Bertie looked exhausted as he spoke. I gently patted his back, acknowledging all the hardships he had endured. Several years have passed since Bertie's divorce from Ashley. Ashley is now living a far cry from her dream life, working part-time at a supermarket checkout and other back-end jobs she once looked down upon. Trying to pay off the debt her parents took on for her, she conveyed to Bertie, "I would like you to repay a part of the debt," pleading tearfully and sharing her own hardships alongside her request. But he firmly told her that she must work hard and pay for herself, as it was her own doing. Despite the ongoing challenges, including dealing with a persistent Ashley and even contacting the police, Bertie is now happy. A female colleague supported him throughout the ordeal of handling Ashley's stalking and his own distrust of women. Though it took time, Bertie became optimistic about marriage again and has since remarried the supportive colleague. They now live in a small apartment, saving up for a new home. We are relieved to see Bertie finally regaining his smile. I have been unfaithful. I can't live with you any longer. We need to separate, my wife Lily told me one day at dinner. It came out of nowhere, but it was typical for Lily to suddenly announce her decisions. Once Lily made up her mind, she never changed it. So even with big decisions that affected both of us, I didn't argue much. I never thought getting a divorce was okay. But at that time, I felt helpless. If Lily cheated or wanted a divorce, there was nothing I could do. This was because the company I worked for went bankrupt due to the economic crisis in the late 2000s. After losing my job, I desperately searched for a new one, not just for myself, but for us. For Lily's sake, I sent my resume to dozens of companies. However, I'd only managed to get interviews with 3 of them, and I didn't make it to the final stage with any of them. Despite having about 5 years of experience at a subsidiary of a major automotive manufacturer, it didn't seem to matter. I felt my spirit break. I remembered how lucky I felt when I got the job at my previous company. Receiving that job offer letter was the happiest moment of my life. My biggest challenge in job hunting was the interviews. I was already uncomfortable with public speaking, and many companies used group interviews, which made it even harder for me. The company where I was accepted had a group discussion as part of the selection process. At the table, there were students who took the lead in expressing their opinions, others who summarized everyone's ideas and presented new ones, and some who pointed out flaws in others' opinions. Everyone was desperate to impress the interviewers, just like me. But I was overwhelmed by the atmosphere and couldn't articulate even a tenth of what I had in mind. After the discussion ended, I felt deeply discouraged by my inability to contribute anything. I thought to myself, there's no way I would pass, not even by some stroke of luck. When I received the job offer letter, I was convinced it must be some kind of mistake. I checked the contents of the envelope, and Lily, who was beside me, rejoiced as if it were her own achievement. Believe in yourself. People who truly understand your worth will recognize it, Lily said, patting my back. Lily and I met in a university club since we both entered the Faculty of Law. Before the first lecture, Lily and a few others entered the classroom, and I was intrigued by Lily's lively presentation about the club. Shortly after we started our studies, a male friend and I peeked into the club room, and it was Lily who explained the club to us. The club, despite its formal-sounding name, the Legal Research Society, was a casual group where the main purpose was to foster connections through drinking parties and sports events. Lily played the role of a coordinator for new club members and efficiently carried out her responsibilities. As I tend to be more laid back by nature, there was something about Lily that initially attracted me to her. During the welcome party for new club members, the topic of our hometowns came up, and I discovered that Lily and I were from the same area, just about 2 train stops away from each other. That became the starting point for us to bond, and we often found ourselves excitedly discussing our shared hometown experiences. I believe another reason we could easily talk was because I had taken a gap year, so I was the same age as Lily. During the first summer vacation after I entered university, we decided to go home together since we had the opportunity. There wasn't any particular reason for me to decline, so I agreed. However, for some reason, Lily got off at the same station as me. I want to see the town where you were born and raised, even if just a little bit, she said, seeing my puzzled expression. Lily smiled and explained it with a cheerful tone. However, I felt slightly awkward being with Lily because my mother was supposed to be waiting at the station to pick me up. My mother was standing right in front of the ticket gate, looking slightly surprised yet happy. The reason became clear. Lily was standing beside me, and my mother clearly misunderstood, thinking Lily was my girlfriend. So I decided to clarify things right away. This young lady is, I began. But before I could introduce Lily as my senior at university, she spoke up. I am in a relationship with Jack. I'm Lily. I froze at Lily's sudden words. She looked at me with a mischievous smile, giggling. My mother responded with a confused, well, okay then. Then she asked, so, how about coming to our house now? In response, Lily said, I'm truly tempted by your kindness, but my parents are also waiting for me at home. I'll have to take a rain check for another opportunity. With those words, she passed through the ticket gate again and headed toward the platform. On the way back home, my mother bombarded me with questions about Lily. That night, I sent a message to Lily. What do you mean by all of that? I texted Lily. A few minutes later, I received a reply. I just expressed my feelings honestly. The rest is up to you. I responded with a simple, got it. Immediately, she replied, what do you mean if I got it? It's either we're together or we're not. There are only two options for an answer. I typed back, I want to be in a relationship with you, and sent the message. Her response came quickly. All right then. From that moment, I felt our relationship dynamic was established. During my job search, I didn't have any particular company in mind. Even the choice of where to send my applications was made after discussing it with Lily. Don't you have any initiative of your own? Lily would often caution me. Each time, I'd respond with something like, I have Mother Lily, the absolute deity, with me, so everything will be fine. At that time, I had little awareness of making decisions about my own life. I was always receiving advice from Lily. Despite her saying, I'm truly discouraged with you, Lily always provided me with precise advice. I believe Lily probably knew more about me than I did myself. Years after graduating from university, I married Lily, and I thought our life together was going smoothly. So, when Lily suddenly confessed to cheating on me, I was deeply shocked. Tomorrow morning, I will be leaving this house. As I am solely at fault, I will agree to whatever compensation you suggest. Please contact the lawyer I will appoint for further arrangements, she said, delivering her words without any emotional expression. Then she entered the bedroom. I couldn't say a word or take any action in response. Frustrated with my own helplessness, I couldn't sleep at all that night. Early the next morning, I heard the sound of Lily waking up and getting ready. I wanted to wake up immediately and speak to her right away. However, I didn't know what to say or how to approach the situation, so I remained still in bed. After I heard the sound of Lily closing the door and everything became quiet, I finally got out of bed. At the dining table, breakfast was prepared for me. Next to it, there was a divorce document, the wedding ring, and the house key. And note with the words, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for everything up until now, was also left behind. I collapsed in despair and cried out loud, sobbing. Tears overflowed from my eyes in such abundance that I couldn't believe I had so many within me. Eventually, I realized I had fallen asleep on the dining room floor. With no motivation to do anything, I stared at the ceiling, feeling lost. As I remained in a daze for a while, the image that emerged in my mind was Lily's smiling face. What's the point now? I kept thinking, shaking my head, but Lily's smile wouldn't fade from my mind. It was then that I realized once again how much I truly loved Lily, and I thought to myself, I should be a man that Lily can be proud of. Some might think I'm being too sensitive or that there's no need to stand by a cheating partner. However, regardless of what others may think, I still firmly believed and trusted that Lily was my greatest ally and understanding partner. Afterward, I worked tirelessly and wholeheartedly. I took on tasks that I was not naturally inclined towards, such as sales as a contract employee, and gained experience in more manual labor-oriented jobs. Due to the unfamiliar physical labor, there were times when I couldn't move the next day due to exhaustion. One day, I received a call from my former boss at the previous company. I have an acquaintance who is recruiting staff for a children's care facility. If you're still looking for work, would you be interested in giving it a try? It seemed my former boss, who had been contacting me from time to time, had been keeping an eye on me since I hadn't found a job yet. At that time, I had changed from my previous passive self and had become more proactive in facing various challenges. Through various jobs, I had developed a stronger mindset of let's challenge anything and everything. Please count me in. I readily accepted my former boss's offer without hesitation. At the children's care facility, there were various types of children: cheerful ones, quiet ones, restless ones, quick-tempered ones, easily injured ones, and many more. Many of those children had experienced things I couldn't even imagine despite their young age. Reflecting on my life, I realized how naive and indulgent I had been. As I sincerely engaged with the children, who were honest with their feelings, I found my own heart healing in the process. I began to think that maybe this was the place where I truly wanted to work. With my doubts gone and a lighter heart, I interacted with the children in a more natural and genuine way. One day, while I was doing desk work, the facility director called me into his office. As soon as I entered, I froze in place. It was Lily's parents. Both had solemn expressions on their faces. "I'll leave you to talk amongst yourselves," the director said, leaving the room. A few days later, on my day off from work, I headed toward a beach park nearby. This park was full of memories, where Lily and I used to take walks after getting married. She was already at the bench overlooking the harbor where the yachts were moored. I recognized her from her back. "Long time no see." I greeted her. "It's been a while. How have you been?" she asked as she turned around. I sat down on the bench, leaving a little space between us. "You didn't, did you? Cheat on me?" I asked straightforwardly. There was no need to beat around the bush. Lily nodded silently. "I heard most of the story from your parents," I said. Lily's parents had told me why she had brought up the idea of divorce and how she had been living. Lily had felt it was her responsibility for not actively searching for a new job, even when I lost mine. She believed it would be the same cycle if she continued to search for a job with me as it had been before. Therefore, she thought divorce was the best way for both of us to make a fresh start on our own paths. However, she couldn't imagine that I would accept the idea of divorce if she just brought it up straightforwardly. Lily explained that she had faked an affair to manipulate me into accepting the divorce. She didn't show much emotion during the divorce discussion because she was afraid she would start crying if she became emotionally involved. After returning to her parents' home, Lily became so depressed that her parents grew concerned about her well-being. Lily's parents had thought about telling me the truth several times, but she had stopped them. Eventually, my parents told her parents about me working at the child welfare facility, and they visited to see me. When I heard about that, I thought, isn't that going a bit too far? However, Lily replied, "I thought you needed this kind of tough love to start fresh and carve out a new path for yourself from scratch." I asked, "Didn't you think I would remarry?" Lily replied, "At that time, it was what it was. I was prepared to accept that it was our fate." "You're such a determined person," I murmured. "But after hearing the story from your parents, I also realized that you have your own vulnerabilities. From now on, I want you to show me those weaknesses as well." Lily responded, "That's all up to you from now on." We shared a knowing smile. At that moment, I thought to myself, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. I want to cherish the happiness I found, even if it took a detour, and treasure it for the rest of my life.
The day my father passed away, my mother told me, Emily and I will take over all the remaining assets. To be honest, I didn't want to discuss the inheritance on the day of my father's funeral. However, Emily eagerly pushed the conversation forward, her eyes sparkling. There's a will, too. Look, Emily said proudly, showing it to me. Just after Dad went to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him write this. Dad immediately agreed to leave nothing to you, sis. Dad did that, even though he always relied on me. Yes, he did, Emily replied. I know it's harsh, but Dad always found me more likable and favored me. Before I could respond, my mother continued with a smile. Since you don't have a job, we have no intention of giving you a single penny from the inheritance. We'll be enjoying a trip abroad, so prepare to leave this house by the time we return. Wait, how can I accept this? Why would you do this? Before I could say anything else, my mother and Emily retorted coldly, Be quiet. It's impossible for you to get anything from us now. With Dad gone, we can finally act freely. Your role here is done, so leave immediately. All the sacrifices I made for Dad, everything I did for him, and this is the result. How cruel. Giving everything for such an ungrateful father felt pointless. Even if I wished for their help now, it was too late. Hearing their words, any remaining feelings I had for my mother and Emily disappeared entirely. Without expressing all I wanted to say, I responded, I understand. I can't stay with you two any longer. I'll gladly leave. With that, I left my childhood home. My name is Ashley. I have a sister, Emily, who is 4 years younger than me. We're a family of 4. Emily's personality is similar to our mother's. She's charming but sometimes lazy, and she often teased my father and me, who are more sincere. Our mother, having a temperament like Emily, felt especially fond of her. When we were children, it was evident she favored Emily over me. Whenever she met her friends, my mother would only take Emily, often leaving me at home. She said it was embarrassing to show plain and quiet Ashley to her friends. On the other hand, she was very proud of Emily, who was friendly and loved by everyone. Even with such a mother and sister, I could live positively because of my father. He valued my sincerity and loved both Emily and me equally. I deeply appreciated and loved my father's fair attitude. Even after becoming an adult, my mother's treatment of me remained unchanged. However, thanks to my father's presence, our household remained stable. After my father retired at 65, he had an accident at home. He tripped over a small step and broke a bone. Despite surgery and rehabilitation, his aging muscles didn't recover well. As he spent more time bedridden and needed care, my mother and Emily became even colder towards him. One day, I overheard my mother and Emily chatting excitedly while looking at a guidebook. Hey Mom, what do you think about this inn? The food looks delicious too. Maybe we should go with this one. Curious, I asked, what are you talking about? My mother answered with a hint of annoyance, we're planning a family trip. Considering Dad's difficulty moving around, isn't traveling hard for him? I asked. Emily smiled and said, well, we're not thinking of bringing him. We plan to leave him at home. That's cruel. It would be hard for him if he's left alone. If Dad's not going, I'll stay home with him, I said. My mother and Emily just smiled at each other. My mother then said, that's fine. If that's the case, Emily and I will go by ourselves. Whether you two come or not is up to you, but since it's a family trip, we'll be using money from Dad's bank account. A quick glance at the guidebook revealed they had chosen a room for just 2 people. It was clear they never intended to bring either my father or me. After that, my mother and Emily frequently went out alone, staying at high-quality inns and dining at fancy restaurants, as if neither my father nor I existed. I kept an eye on their actions from a distance, trying to finish my work quickly to take care of my father. When I couldn't handle everything alone, I sought help from care services for tasks like bathing assistance or accompanying my father on short walks. On days when I had to work overtime, I asked my mother and Emily to look after him, but they always avoided the responsibility. One day, a care service staff member called, Ashley, I came to help with the bath, but is there no one at home today? Alarmed, I quickly called my mother and Emily. Despite informing them of the staff's visit in advance, they had left my father alone and gone out. When they finally returned, I confronted them, but there was no apology. The staff are professionals, right? It's okay even if we aren't there. Dad is an adult. He'll be fine being left alone. We don't want our time taken up caring for him like you do, they said. genuinely believing they were doing nothing wrong. I realized I couldn't rely on them and decided to take care of my father myself. Juggling work and caregiving was far from easy, especially since neither my mother nor Emily showed any concern or understanding. My father's condition worsened. He spent more time sitting than walking and ate much less. As the 9th year of caring for my father approached, I became concerned about how frail he looked. When I took him to the hospital, we received a shocking diagnosis. Your father has advanced cancer. I was devastated. I realized we might not have much time left, and I was determined to support him in his final days. I quit my job to care for my father full-time. When I told my mother and Emily about his condition, the reactions were unexpected. My mother simply commented, "Really? He never drank or smoked. It's unfortunate that such a sincere person ended up with cancer." Emily, with a stunned expression, said, "I can't believe you'd give up your job to take care of Dad. I'd never make that choice. I thought they would be concerned about him, but they showed no signs of it at all. I was honestly surprised by their indifference, as if it was someone else's business. They only visited him at the hospital briefly and never came for a proper visit. I supported my father daily during his chemotherapy treatments. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't stop the cancer's progression, and half a year later, he passed away. The days after the diagnosis went by in a blur. Upon hearing of his death, my mother and Emily started a private discussion and left me to arrange the funeral on my own. They disappeared somewhere, and I didn't even have time to mourn my father as I had to handle everything. As the funeral began, my mother appeared and delivered the chief mourner's speech despite having done nothing. She put on a face for the public. I was irritated by her behavior, but the funeral proceeded smoothly. Worn out, I headed home, only to be invited to the living room by my mother and Emily, who had already returned. They said they had something to discuss. Without any consideration for my exhaustion, my mother abruptly declared, "Regarding your father's inheritance, Emily and I will inherit this house and all other assets." I wasn't in the mood to discuss inheritance on the day my father passed away, but Emily chimed in, "We even have a proper will. Look," she said, proudly presenting a document. Right after Dad was admitted to the hospital, Mom and I visited him and had him sign this. It states that you won't inherit anything. Dad agreed to it immediately. "Dad did?" I asked, stunned. With a smirk, Emily said, "After all the help you provided, it's so cold, right? Maybe Dad in the end preferred me over his too serious elder daughter." "That's impossible," I began to respond, but my mother interrupted with a grin. "Clearly Emily is more adorable. Your father always stayed home and had no hobbies, so he surely saved a lot. Mom even quit her job because of the inheritance, and I took some time off work to enjoy it." Before I could say anything, they continued their conversation. My mother then told me, "You, who have no job, won't get a penny from the inheritance. We plan to enjoy a vacation abroad for a while, so you should leave this place by then." I hurriedly countered, "Wait a minute. Do you genuinely believe what you're doing is right?" Without waiting for me to finish, both my mother and Emily firmly responded, "Shut your mouth. It's a waste of time trying to take the inheritance from us. With your father gone, we'll do as we please. Your role here is done. Please leave this house promptly." To think that after all I sacrificed for Dad, this is what I get. There was no need to go to such lengths for such an ungrateful father. It's pointless to regret and think about it now. Hearing those words, any remaining bond I felt for my mother and Emily was completely severed. I couldn't forgive them for speaking that way about my beloved father. Holding back what I wanted to say, I calmly told them, "I understand your thoughts. From now on, I can't imagine living together with you two. I'll gladly leave." Despite their initial surprise at my acceptance, the two soon smiled smugly together. "Good to know. Once you leave this house, never rely on us again. Our relationship ends here. Whatever happens to you, we want no part in it. Don't even think of contacting us," my mother said. Receiving this intense sentiment, I packed only my essentials and left the house. A few days after the inheritance discussion, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my mother, who had claimed she would cut off contact with me. When I answered, she immediately confronted me in anger. "What have you done? Where has all the money from your father's account gone? Why are you suddenly calling? Didn't you say you wouldn't contact me?" I replied, "Silence. This is an emergency. Return your father's savings immediately." "What are you talking about? I left the passbook at the old house, didn't I? I have no way of accessing it after I left." The money in the account is definitely gone. Such a significant amount of savings couldn't have disappeared so suddenly, my mother accused. She suspected that I had squandered my father's money. Mom, haven't you ever checked the account balance before? Huh? I haven't bothered with such things, she replied. I see. If you had, you would have noticed that Dad's savings weren't that much to begin with. What do you mean? His savings were, oh, where did his retirement money go? We used it for our wedding ceremony and the new house, I explained. Wedding? New house? I have no idea what you're talking about. I had been in a romantic relationship with a man named Sean, who was in charge of the caregiving service for my father. Our relationship started through our mutual care for my father. I had told my father about Sean soon after we began dating, and Sean proposed. At that time, I was overwhelmed with caregiving and work responsibilities and couldn't make a decision. Upon learning the truth, my father said, "Care for yourself more than me. I want you to have a happy marriage," and he supported me. He even started helping with the wedding venue selection and looking for a new place to live. We had reserved a wedding date for the following year and signed a contract for a new apartment that my father liked. This all happened 6 months before we found out that he had terminal cancer. As a gesture of gratitude, my father covered most of the costs for the wedding and the new apartment. That was the reason for the decrease in the account balance. Hearing this, my mother's voice trembled, clearly shaken. So there wasn't any inheritance for us to inherit in the first place. Primarily just the family home, but given its location, we shouldn't expect a high selling price. Emily, overhearing the conversation, snatched the phone from my mother in panic. Wait, so the financial assistance for your wedding is much more than the inheritance for Mom and me? That seems to be the case. Dad knew about my marriage and me leaving the house, so maybe he didn't see a problem in leaving the family home to both of you. He might have used a significant amount for me and intended the inheritance to compensate for that. Could it be that the reason you quit your job was because your marriage had been decided upon? That's right, Sean is also involved in investment activities and is financially stable. He wanted me to become a full-time housewife. Also, I thought if I resigned early, I could focus on taking care of our father. I can't believe it. Why did you keep the news about your marriage and the savings a secret from us? Taking a deep breath, I answered, I thought about telling you several times, but every time, neither of you showed any interest and avoided the topic. Why didn't you stop me from taking a break from work or Mom from quitting her part-time job? How are we supposed to live now? When I wanted to talk to you after the funeral, wasn't it you and Mom who shut me down, saying you can't expect anything from us? I thought family members should help each other out. When I was swamped with work and caregiving, you were out having fun, neglecting Dad. How can I think of someone who said such mean things as family? Don't just say whatever is convenient for you, I told them, shocked and lost for words. Emily was taken aback. Afterward, my mother pleaded with me, Ashley, the truth is, I've already paid for the trip. I also made various purchases expecting the inheritance. So now I have no savings left. So what about it? I've already quit my part-time job, right? If we don't get any inheritance money, we won't have any money for next month. So until I find a new job, I hope you can lend us some. When you kicked me out of the family home, didn't you say you'd never come to me again? That our relationship was over? That you wouldn't interfere with whatever happens to me in the future? About that, neither of you ever helped when Dad and I were going through tough times. Now, when you're in trouble, you want to rely on me. That's incredibly brazen, I said. Without waiting for my mother to finish, I ended the call and blocked their numbers. I was utterly disgusted by my mother and sister, who only claim to be family when they're in trouble. I decided to distance myself from these two. Later on, I heard from various people that although my mother and Emily had canceled their trip, they couldn't get a refund. They'd been barely scraping by, asking friends and relatives for money. They had to sell their house, but as I expected, they didn't get as much as they hoped. With the initial expenses for a new place and moving costs, they had hardly any money left. Emily returned to work, but because she asked her colleagues for money, her relationships at work became strained. She had planned to leave her job soon after finding a good partner, but because of the situation, that partner, as well as other men, distanced themselves. Her friends, too. My mother tried to find another part-time job, but her previous workplace had already hired someone else, so it was hard for her to return. Due to her age, her job opportunities were limited. She's been working diligently, facing complaints from younger colleagues. Currently, they manage their living expenses with my mother's meager part-time salary and Emily's earnings, slowly repaying their debts. Both of them seem worn out. As for me, I was able to have a small wedding at the venue my father chose. The only regret is that my father couldn't be there for my wedding, but I believe he's watching over our happy moments from somewhere. My married life with Sean has been smoother than expected. We're enjoying peaceful and fulfilling days together. I'm eternally grateful to my father for supporting my relationship with Sean and giving me this opportunity. I've had to build a peaceful life with my husband, always remembering my gratitude to my father. I apologize for an unattractive wife. During our wedding ceremony, my mother-in-law suddenly grabbed the microphone from my father-in-law, who was giving a speech. She blurted out harsh words. I'll discipline her properly from now on to at least make her a better wife on the inside, looking satisfied, which was a stark contrast to the shocked silence that filled the room. I was stunned and turned to look at my husband only to find him smirking disturbingly. My mind went blank and my body trembled from the surprise and shock. An older gentleman purposefully made a loud noise as he stood up from his seat. Is that all you wanted to say? He asked, drawing everyone's attention. He then walked toward me confidently. My husband's eyes widened in surprise when he saw him. Ignoring my husband's reaction, the man took my arm and said, "Let's get out of here." Before I could say anything, he led me out of the reception hall, dragging along the wedding dress I never wanted in the first place. As we walked through the hotel corridor, a flood of thoughts filled my mind. My name is Angela, a 35-year-old woman who grew up in a single-parent household after my parents divorced when I was in elementary school. In my 20s, my mother fell ill and needed care, so I balanced work and taking care of her. I was still single in my 30s when I met a man named Steven. He proposed to me despite knowing about my responsibilities toward my mother, after meeting me at work where I assisted him at the reception desk. Steve was a great guy, and I thought I might never get another chance to marry if I didn't take this opportunity. But I couldn't just leave my mother alone. After a year of dating, I struggled with my decision. However, Steve reassured me, saying, "I know how much you care about your mother, so why don't we become a family of 3? Touched by his proposal, I decided to marry him. When we announced our marriage to our parents, my mother was overjoyed, but my soon-to-be mother-in-law, Ruth, had a completely opposite reaction. I'll tell you up front, I don't recognize a woman from a single-parent family as a worthy wife, she said sharply when we visited Steve's house to introduce ourselves as a couple for the first time. From then on, every time we met for wedding preparations, she responded to everything I said with sarcasm. She's just an old hag past her prime, and she's got a mother to take care of. My poor son, she would say. I could tolerate her insulting me, but I couldn't stand her speaking ill of my mother. After all, it was Steve who said he wanted to be part of our family. I bet you used some sly tricks to seduce my son, she accused. I didn't do such a thing, I replied. Well, your mother probably cheated on your father, and that's why he left. Ruth would lash out. Every time I tried to defend myself, she would attack me even worse. I thought about talking to Steve about it, but I didn't want to burden him with this unnecessary worry so close to our wedding. Ruth became more emboldened and interfered in the wedding plans. She even showed up the day we were picking out the wedding dress with my husband. I'll choose the best wedding dress for you, she announced. Mom has a great sense of style. She'll definitely pick a good dress if you're happy about it, aren't you? My husband chimed in. I appreciated their intentions. I want to choose my own dress. But I want to choose a dress that I personally like, I responded. But I came all this way for you. I'm so disappointed, my mother-in-law said, sounding wounded. Hey, don't make Mom cry, my husband snapped at me. He always sided with his mother, especially when she played the victim. But I couldn't give in when it came to my wedding dress, a highlight of the wedding. I'm really sorry, but I'll be choosing my own dress. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and I want to be completely satisfied with it, I stated firmly. Reluctantly, my mother-in-law backed off, but she held a grudge. On the morning of the wedding, she did something unthinkable. What an awful dress. The veil's tasteless too. You'd look better wearing a garbage bag with a supermarket sale flyer on your head, she exclaimed when she saw my wedding dress in the dressing room of the hotel where the ceremony was held. I was upset but wanted to avoid trouble on my big day, so I tried to stay calm. My mom, who loves sewing, made the veil herself. We chose the dress together. I really like it, I replied. You're going to wear something chosen by a woman who cheated and got dumped by her man. My mother-in-law suddenly shouted, furious. Then she splashed canned coffee from her purse all over my dress. Stop it. What are you doing? I exclaimed, watching in horror as my dress turned brown. I grabbed a towel to wipe it, but it was too late. The dress was ruined. This is what happens when you don't listen to me. I've left a dress I chose with the ceremony staff. You're wearing that for the wedding, okay? She stated and left the dressing room. She must have planned this, bringing the coffee to ruin my dress and having another one ready. Shaking with anger and frustration, I headed to the waiting room where my husband was and tearfully explained what happened. This is so unfair. It's going to ruin the wedding. What do you want me to do about it? He retorted. It's what your mother did. I've been silent until now, but there were other times. Enough already. You're annoying, he interrupted, shouting in anger. His expression was just like my mother-in-law's when she spilled the coffee on my dress. I was taken aback by his sudden change in attitude, but he quickly apologized. Oh, I'm sorry. I just can't deal with this right now. My husband was sweating and looked extremely tense. Feeling sorry for losing my temper, I decided to calm down and listen to him. You seem pretty stressed out. What's going on? I asked. Actually, the CEO of my company is suddenly attending our wedding. He happened to be at the hotel for work and met my boss. After hearing about our wedding, he prepared a gift and decided to attend since there was an empty seat due to a colleague's illness. What a coincidence. Showing off your skills here might lead to a promotion. You don't have time to worry about your dress. Just do as my mother says. I didn't appreciate his attitude, but it seemed useless to argue. I decided to leave the scene. Then the wedding began. The ceremony at the church on the hotel's rooftop went smoothly, and I was relieved until the family speeches at the reception. My mother-in-law went all out. Raised in a single-parent household, she lacks common sense and is an ugly bride, but I'll make sure to discipline her, she declared loudly, ignoring my father-in-law's pleas to stop. Just as I was about to explode with anger, a middle-aged man stood up with vigor and came over to me. You don't belong in a place like this, he said, staring at my mother-in-law. Then he started to lead me away. Who is that old man interrupting my speech? What nerve does he have? My mother-in-law shrieked as she watched the man leading me away. She shrieked, but next to her Stephen was turning pale. Why is the CEO here? It turned out that the middle-aged man was the CEO of Stephen's company. Stephen was sweating profusely and looked extremely flustered. We hurriedly left the reception hall and returned to the dressing room, leaving the confused guests behind. Why is my father here? I wondered. That's right, the CEO of Stephen's company was also my biological father. The reason for my parents' divorce was a personality mismatch. They fought constantly while working and decided to divorce because they thought it was negatively affecting me. Even after the divorce, my parents occasionally met. I saw my father several times a month and received proper child support until I became an adult. He even helped out when my mother needed care, so our relationship was very good. However, I hadn't asked much about my father's job. I couldn't believe my father was the CEO of Stephen's company. Even I was surprised by this coincidence. Why are you here when you said you had an important business meeting and couldn't attend my wedding? I asked my father. My business meeting ended much earlier than I thought, he replied. I decided to come here to give you the gift at least. Then I met one of the employees at the entrance. It seemed my father was the boss Stephen was talking about. He found out it was my wedding when he asked for the names of the bride and groom to prepare the gift. When I told the employee of the situation, I heard there was a last-minute cancellation and a seat was available, so I decided to participate. Why didn't you tell me then? I asked. After consulting with your mother, we decided to make it a surprise. I never imagined it would turn out like this, my father said, looking somewhat sad. Just as I was about to talk to my father, the door of the dressing room opened. Angela, you can't just run off like that, my mother-in-law said in a fake sweet voice. I had never heard her speak like that before, and it gave me goosebumps. She must have heard from her husband that my father was the CEO. Who do you think caused all of this? My father asked sternly. That was just a little joke, she replied, trying to brush it off. How dare you make such a vulgar joke at my daughter's big moment? That's even more unforgivable, my father retorted. What? No, it wasn't a joke. Then, so you're saying you seriously called my daughter ugly? Challenged my father. My mother-in-law was lost for words, repeating and well, her eyes darting back and forth. Suddenly, my husband rushed in, his footsteps echoing, and he prostrated himself before my father. I apologize for the rudeness of my mother, he said. You're apologizing to the wrong person, my father said, looking down at my husband with a cold gaze and a stern voice. Angela, I'm sorry. My mom did all this on her own. If that's the case, why didn't you stop your mother when she was insulting me? I asked. I was shocked and couldn't move. Besides, my dad tried to stop her. But it sure seemed like you were grinning and sitting pretty comfortably, I pointed out. That's just your imagination. Anyway, the only one to blame for everything is my mom, my husband shouted, pointing accusingly at his mother. Stephen, are you betraying your mama? Didn't we agree to discipline this cheeky wife together? My mother-in-law protested. Hey, don't say unnecessary things, my husband exclaimed, covering his mother's mouth to stop her from speaking further. Her muffled voice was truly comical. So would you like to explain what's really going on? My father asked. No, this is something my mother did on her own. It's for your own good, to be honest, right now, don't you think? My husband stammered. As my father continued questioning, my husband shuddered and finally began to speak. When Angela insisted on choosing her wedding dress, my mother said she would become a cheeky wife if not properly disciplined. What's wrong with choosing my own dress? I asked. It's only natural that a wife listens to her mother-in-law, isn't it? If you can't even do that, I thought you'd become a bad wife who wouldn't listen to her husband in the future. First of all, a married couple should be equals, right? There's no hierarchy. If I can't make you listen to me, there's no point in marrying a woman on the verge of becoming an old hag, my husband admitted. The truth finally slipped out. He had decided to marry me not because he loved me for who I am, but because he thought I would be a convenient tool to use. All those words about wanting to take care of my mother and becoming a family of 3 were just lies. Were they all lies? Of course, you had plenty of savings, didn't you? I was planning to use that to build a 2-family house. I wanted to make you work like a slave and live happily with my mother, but now it's all ruined. Once my husband started speaking his mind, there was no stopping him. He was not only intent on making me submit, but also willing to drain our savings. How selfish could a person be? Seeing my disgust, my husband seemed to realize he had misspoken and his face took on a shocked expression. No, that's not what I meant. That's it. It's over. You don't need a wife who won't spend money or act as a servant, do you? Wait a minute. I just lost my temper and blurted out something I didn't mean. As if I could believe that. I simply can't marry you. Sensing my resolve, my husband was visibly shaken, pacing around aimlessly. Then he seemed to remember something. Our wedding is today. We can't possibly send the guests home now. I will apologize to our guests and return their gifts. Since your mother is the cause of our canceled engagement, you will bear the costs of the wedding. You're joking. Even if we were to break up, it's your fault for making a fuss about one little outburst from my mom. As if it was just one time, huh? All the awful things you've said to me are right here. I pulled out my smartphone from my purse. I had recorded countless unbearable words from my mother-in-law. Pressing the play button, words like poor, ugly, harsh woman came out in quick succession in her unpleasant voice. When did I record all this? Well, I'm not a fool, you know. I will be claiming damages for emotional distress. I was just trying to discipline my daughter-in-law. I didn't do anything wrong. If you can't pay willingly, I'll take you to court. Please say the same thing in front of the judge. What are you talking about? This isn't a joke. Realizing she'd be at a disadvantage in court, my mother-in-law went pale and slumped on the spot. I'll reconsider your position at the company as well, my father added, with the final nail in the coffin. My husband finally broke down and fell to his knees. I'm sorry, Angela. Please forgive me. That's right, Angela. You're already married. You can't just divorce so easily. If we can overcome this wall, we'll make a great couple, right? My husband and mother-in-law started pleading. I forcefully shook them off and glared at them. Silence. Scum. Go to hell. With that, I left the dressing room. I then followed through with my declaration of canceling my engagement with Stephen and filed a claim for emotional distress against my mother-in-law. The full cost of the wedding was paid by my ex-husband, and the issue was finally settled. After that, my ex-husband was ostracized at work when his colleagues found out about the wedding fiasco. Additionally, at my father's behest, he was relocated to a remote branch in Nebraska, effectively a demotion. My former mother-in-law was scorned by her relatives for tarnishing their reputation and divorced by my former father-in-law. She was promptly kicked out of the house. I am now focusing on my work and have no interest in getting married again. Over time, my parents have also regained their composure, and we occasionally have family dinners. I am now living a very happy life.
My family was dining in a fancy restaurant when Eric, my husband, took over the reservation I had made for Dad's birthday celebration. He brought his in-laws along and said, "A single father like yours doesn't belong in fancy restaurants. Stick to cheap pubs." Despite my frustration, I decided to set Eric straight. "You realize this is my brother's place, right?" I said. "I'm Elizabeth, a 27-year-old office worker. My parents divorced when I was little, and Dad raised me. They split because Dad was always working and rarely home, which wore Mom down. Although Dad still loved Mom and didn't want the divorce, he eventually agreed when she said, 'I'm tired of waiting. Set me free.' After they divorced, I stayed with Dad because of financial reasons. He would always say, 'It's not Mom's fault. It's my fault for relying on her too much and neglecting her. I regret making her feel lonely.' When I asked why Mom left, he would sigh sadly. Despite the divorce, Dad always put me first. He made it to my school events and never missed a birthday or Christmas. Some people made insensitive remarks about our single-parent household, but Dad's love made me ignore them. After the divorce, I occasionally saw Mom, but our relationship grew distant after she remarried and had another child. Once I started working, Dad retired early to enjoy a quieter life. He had worked hard to support me, and I wanted him to pursue his interests now. Although I live alone, I frequently visit Dad. 2 years ago, I married Eric, who was introduced to me by a friend. Eric is hardworking and honest, and he quickly earned Dad's approval. His in-laws were also kind and accepted me immediately. However, the suggestion to move into Eric's family home brought me considerable distress. Both my parents are getting older, and I worry about them. They are both retired and hardly go out or talk to anyone these days. Moving in together seems like a good opportunity. Please consider it," Eric pleaded earnestly. Of course, I wanted to respond to his desperate request, but moving into his parents' house would put a significant distance between me and my dad, making it hard to check on him as often as I used to. Dad is healthy, but if something happened, he might not be found in time. I was torn about what to do, but eventually Dad gave me his advice. "I'm healthy enough to live on my own. I don't want to burden you, and you should take care of Eric's family. Call me if anything happens," emphasized to Dad, and reluctantly agreed to move in. However, just a few weeks after moving in, I began to regret my decision. Eric and his parents, whom I thought were kind, drastically changed their behavior towards me. They started treating me like a servant, leaving all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, solely to me while Eric and his parents did nothing. I asked Eric to help. "I'm tired from work too. Housework is a wife's job, right?" he retorted. My protest that I also work fell on deaf ears. "It's different. You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents," Eric would dismissively say. Coming home tired from work only to face an endless list of chores was overwhelming. Not just the chores, but Eric's mother, Mary, relentlessly tormented me. She'd purposefully spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the slightest speck of dust. "This spot is dirty. Clean it," she would order, leaving dirty clothes all over for me to pick up. After I washed and carefully folded them, she'd say, "These folds will crease the clothes. Do it again," and kick them apart. Moreover, Mary often made disparaging remarks about me being from a single-father household. "You can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family. How pitiful. It's amazing you can hold a job. The company must be blind to hire such a bottom-rung woman. It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up." I was against marrying someone from such a family, but Eric insisted. I deeply disapprove. You should be more devoted to us and Eric. If we hadn't welcomed you as a wife, you'd be living a sad, lonely life with your dad. Hearing such insults about Dad, I had to suppress the urge to hit Mary. The worst part was that John, my father-in-law, and Eric did nothing to intervene while they witnessed Mary's treatment of me. Far from supporting me, John looked at me scornfully while Eric joined Mary in mocking me. Mom's right. You lack any gratitude towards us. That's why she's cold to you, Eric sneered. A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You barely have any merits besides working and doing housework, so do them well. Don't even think of asking to share the chores. It's your role as a wife, and making excuses like being tired from work is absolutely unacceptable. I won't allow it, Eric dictated. When I tried to argue or refuse, Eric's mood turned visibly sour. He began treating me as if I were invisible. How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me, he would shout. Mary chimed in. Don't stress Eric when he's tired, making things worse for me. Some of the furniture in the in-laws' house was bought with my money. I was coerced into purchasing them. They abruptly took me to an electronics store and forced me to buy things, capitulating under public pressure to avoid a scene. The harassment didn't end there. Even when I tried to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me. You're our wife now. Focus on our preparations. We need a feast and thorough cleaning done. Your dad's all alone. He won't do much, right? We have other relatives to entertain, they said. When I persisted on going home, they responded childishly by spilling juice on my packed clothes and hiding my shoes. Facing daily complaints and harassment, I reluctantly gave up the idea of going back home. Unable to reveal the truth, I told Dad, the in-laws' house is busy with Christmas preparations, so I'll stay and help. Sorry, I can't make it back. Dad didn't blame me. Then it can't be helped. He gracefully accepted. Don't worry about it. It's busier there with more people. I can manage fine alone here. He comforted me. Eric's ongoing tyranny made me seriously contemplate divorce, but I was troubled about how to tell Dad, who was purely happy about my marriage, without hurting him. In the second year of this tumultuous marriage, Dad turned 60. I secretly made reservations at a renowned fancy restaurant for his celebration. Anticipating complaints from Eric and his parents, I simply told them I had to return home briefly. They grumbled but reluctantly accepted when I promised it would just be for the day. Upon learning about the restaurant reservation, Dad was immensely delighted. I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter. Thank you so much, he said. Hearing Dad express gratitude made me incredibly happy, but I never imagined what would unfold next. As we entered the restaurant and informed the staff of our reservation, we were met with a shocking revelation. A reservation for two? There are 3 people claiming to be relatives already seated there. Confused, I went to see the reserved table, only to find Eric and the in-laws seated there. Eric, noticing me, sneered with a smug smile. Too bad you can't outsmart us and dine fancy just by yourselves, he said. The in-laws didn't even look our way, indulging in the feast they had presumably ordered for themselves. Dad, seeing Eric and the in-laws, looked back and forth between us, clearly bewildered. He had only seen the pleasant side of Eric and the in-laws. His confusion was understandable. Eric, suspecting something from my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had sneakily snooped through my mobile phone. He learned about the 60th birthday celebration at the upscale restaurant and made it their first to preemptively order dishes. Eric began to mock us with a triumphant expression. People from poor single-father households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place. Let us savor the dishes here. Be grateful we're allowing you this much. You lot should go to some cheap pub, he said loudly, drawing annoyed glances from other customers. He remained oblivious, soaked in a sense of superiority. Dad, next to me, was dumbfounded by Eric's audacity. I was at my wits' end. I knew Eric and his family were selfish, but I never expected them to stoop to such shameless levels. My anger peaked as they ruined Dad's special 60th celebration. Suppressing my urge to shout, I calmly delivered a fact to Eric as he sat there smugly. This is my brother's place. He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday. At my words, Eric and the in-laws, who had been disinterestedly eating, froze. My brother, who had been listening to the entire conversation from the back of the restaurant, appeared with an extremely displeased look. He was taken by Mom during the divorce, but unlike our estranged mom, he has maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. My brother owns the restaurant and was the one who suggested celebrating Dad's 60th birthday here. He hadn't attended the wedding due to work, but had seen the photos, so he had recognized Eric. He initially thought Eric and the in-laws joining at the reserved table were part of celebrating with Dad. Seeing Eric mocking me and Dad, and the in-laws not correcting him, my brother was furious. How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that? I regret being considerate just because you're Emily's family. Is this how you always treat her? I prepared the seat for my sister's wish to celebrate Dad, not for people who hijack it just to freeload a meal. We will celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion on another day. You'll be paying for what you ate, he declared. Eric and his party started making excuses. No, that's not it. We were really meant to celebrate, but my brother left them to the staff and to me and Dad outside. I'm sorry for letting such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration. I'll make it up to you. He apologized to us. On the way home, I explained to Dad all the mistreatment from Eric and the in-laws. After listening silently, Dad said, if you're unhappy in your marriage, there's no point. Don't worry about me. Come back home. So I didn't return to the in-laws' house, but went straight to my own home. Shortly after, my brother called to inform me about Eric and the in-laws. They had caused a scene over the bill, but reluctantly paid when threatened with police involvement. Minutes later, Eric called. Where are you? You've embarrassed us. Send the money we paid, he yelled. I will pay a penny. I'm done with you, and we will be divorcing. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared, I firmly replied. I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Eric and the in-laws, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about divorce, Eric panicked. No one but me would marry a woman from a single-father household. Do you want to upset Dad? He threatened. I scoffed. Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than care for the likes of you, I replied. Still, Eric warned, you'll regret this. Think it over. But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Eric and I divorced. He was reluctant due to societal image, but finally gave in as we neared court. I secured substantial evidence of psychological abuse, which ensured I received a fair settlement in the divorce. Additionally, during the property distribution, I made sure to protect my assets and secure my future. I took the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, having the legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply stated that the purchaser naturally has the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after returning to my parents' home, Eric reached out, wanting to reconcile. Apparently, on the day that triggered our divorce at the restaurant, Eric's boss and colleagues were there for a work celebration. They heard everything he said to me and Dad. Eric's boss, who had struggled growing up in a single-parent home, was disappointed in Eric's disparaging remarks about single-father households. Eric, who was a promising employee, lost his standing and any chance of advancement. Moreover, his colleagues had spread the story, and he was now regarded with contempt at work as a psychological abuser. Eric's problems didn't stop at the company. The in-laws' house became chaotic too. Before our divorce, Eric and the in-laws had offloaded all household chores on me. After the divorce, entrenched in laziness, they bickered over who should do the chores. Eric was being pressured by the in-laws to buy new furniture to replace what I took and to contribute more financially. I was wrong, Elizabeth. I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over. Eric pleaded for reconciliation, but my feelings had cooled significantly. He likely faced more pressure to do chores at the in-laws' house and wanted me back to resume my role as a housekeeper. Perhaps he was also trying to offload some of the financial demands from the in-laws onto me. So I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I can see you changing back and exploiting me again once we're married. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner without worrying about Dad. Then perhaps Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. We're divorced now, strangers. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer, I said and hung up the phone. Perhaps my mention of a lawyer resonated because I received no further reconciliation attempts from Eric. Now, I'm living happily at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both looking forward to the baby. While I'm not considering marriage anytime soon, if the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to choose more wisely.
Ah, it's always locked, but it's open now. Before I could stop her, my daughter opened the drawer. Mom, what is this? She asked, looking upset. I looked inside and saw a divorce application and a handwritten letter, which I recognized by its unique quirks. When I picked it up, a photo fell out. It showed my husband with a woman and a boy about the same age as my daughter. On the back of the photo, along with a date, it read, "With my beloved." Seeing this, I immediately understood. Mom, does this mean Dad is cheating? My daughter asked. Let's take this opportunity to clear things up once and for all, I said, smiling at her. I then gave her instructions to tidy up. That day, we submitted the divorce application to the city court. After sorting everything out, we decided to leave our home. I am Anna. I live with my husband and our daughter, a family of 3. I met my husband, Ethan, when I was 28 years old. I was working as an office clerk, and he was in sales. We started talking through work, and since we both enjoyed drinking, we began going out for drinks more often. We grew closer, and after he confessed his feelings to me, we dated for 2 years before getting married. Things were going well for us. However, even a year after our marriage, we were not blessed with children. I wonder if not having kids is because of the alcohol, I complained to my husband. We both enjoyed drinking, so we had a habit of drinking before bed every night. He showed a complicated expression and said, I wonder, but drinking during pregnancy is not good, so let's quit once. I'll quit with you. Thank you, I replied. I'm worried because of my age. I'll go to the hospital too if necessary. I'll come with you, my husband said. My mother keeps nagging me to show her grandchildren. He laughed, and I laughed back, but my feelings were complicated. My mother-in-law isn't a bad person, but she is very eager for grandchildren. Anna, aren't you over 30? It gets harder to get pregnant after 30, you know. I'm worried, she would say. Ethan is an only child. The other day, Mrs. Morrison next door was flaunting her grandchild's photo. It's so annoying. Before we got married, she would make such comments and sigh deeply. Because of my mother-in-law, I started worrying about not being able to have children. She would call me without telling my husband, pressing for grandchildren. I thought it wasn't uncommon to be a first-time mother after 30 these days. However, being strongly pressured by my mother-in-law, I started to feel rushed. So I talked to my husband and we started infertility treatments. My husband was supportive, willing to undergo fertility tests with me. Since neither of us had any issues, we thought we would have a child soon. However, despite the accumulating treatment costs, I couldn't get pregnant. Gradually, my husband began to vent his frustration. Why can't you get pregnant? There's no problem, right? Just get it over with. You're taking off work to go to the hospital too much. Think about me working at the same place. What can I do? I want a baby soon too. It's hard for me to ask for time off. It's not just about you. Then quit your job. Stress isn't good, right? We can get by on my earnings alone, he said, clearly at his limit. Just quit tomorrow. Missing one clerk won't cause any trouble, and the gap will be filled quickly. Wait, just like that, all of a sudden. Let's do that. I'm going to bed now since it's early tomorrow. Good night. Saying this, my husband forcefully ended the conversation. Under his pressure, I quit my job. My dream of being an independent woman was cut short there. But I did want children, so I told myself it was fine to return to work after having a child. For now, I tried to stay positive and focus on trying to conceive. However, my hopes were gradually crushed. Hey, since you're not working, at least take care of the house properly. We don't even have kids. I'm sorry, the hospital was so crowded today, I could have come back earlier. And microwave pasta? Are you kidding me? Even when you were working, you managed to cook something decent. I'm sorry, I was just too tired. Sigh, I'm the one who's tired from working from morning till evening, and this is what I come back to? Forget it, I'll eat out today. Gradually, my husband became harsher towards me. It felt like verbal abuse, but since I had quit my job and was being supported by him, and with no results from our fertility efforts, I couldn't say anything. I spent my days walking on eggshells around my husband, who constantly complained about the housework. This behavior didn't change even in front of his mother, who, instead of reprimanding him, joined him in pressuring me for grandchildren. The stress was worse than when I was working. However, my wish was granted a year later when I became pregnant. It was unexplained infertility, but I was so glad I didn't give up. On the day I found out about my pregnancy, I decided to buy flowers on my way back from the clinic. This will make him return to his kinder self, I thought. But his reaction was lukewarm. Oh, that's great. Congratulations, that's good, he said. After all the talk about having children and quitting my job, I felt indignant. Still, I hoped things would change once the baby was born. Hey, clean up my study, and I don't need dinner today. I have a business trip coming up next week, so take care of the preparations, he said. That's too much. I've been suffering from severe morning sickness and can't eat anything. Everyone goes through that, right? Normally you'd be working, so you should at least be able to do that much, he replied. Leaving those words, my husband went off to work while I struggled with more morning sickness trying to do as he said. During this time, I gave birth to our daughter Nicole. The only thing that changed was that the calls from my mother-in-law for grandchildren stopped. However, she would still suddenly show up, wanting to see her granddaughter. But as long as she cared for Nicole, I could bear it. My husband's verbal abuse continued. While I was busy caring for Nicole, he would leave the household responsibilities to me and go out to drink freely. His late nights out and unauthorized overnight stays increased. You know you're being supported by me, so you should take care of the house and Nicole. Do you think you can live on your own with a child, unable to even keep a job? No way, my husband would come home drunk and hurl such insults at me repeatedly. All I could do was care for Nicole and listen. Hearing his verbal abuse over and over, I started to believe I couldn't divorce him, thinking I wouldn't be able to raise my daughter on my own. However, as Nicole grew, I began to feel a sense of urgency. When my husband started to get angry as usual, Nicole would say, "Mom, apologize quickly." She thought that would calm my husband's anger, and she was right. When I apologized, he would click his tongue and leave the room. Seeing my daughter always being considerate of her irritable father broke my heart. I finally started to consider divorce. This situation isn't good for our daughter's upbringing. I decided to start working part-time in secret, thinking of saving money for after the divorce. I didn't know what my husband Ethan would say if I told him I was starting a job, so I began working as a cashier at a supermarket during the mornings when Nicole was at school. I made sure not to neglect the household chores to avoid complaints from my husband. Time passed, and Nicole reached the 6th grade of elementary school. I told her about the divorce plan before she started middle school. She seemed relieved. I'm glad we can finally get away. I'm sorry for making it tough on you, but everything will be okay now. I've saved up enough money. Overwhelmed with emotion, Nicole and I hugged each other. We'll be free soon, I thought. One day, Ethan asked me to tidy up his study. Nicole was off school, and Ethan was supposed to be off work as well. However, he said, "I'm going on a business trip starting today. I won't be back for a week," and left the house with a large suitcase. It was common for him to suddenly leave for business trips. Nicole and I watched him leave as usual and then started to tidy up his study. Why doesn't Dad clean up his room? It's too messy, Nicole said. Really? He's made me do it for so long he probably can't do it himself anymore. I replied, the worst, but we're getting divorced, right? We can get away. Just a bit more patience, Nicole said, picking up her father's clothes with a determined gesture. As I began tidying the desk and its surrounding papers, I noticed something unusual. The desk drawer, usually locked, was open. Oh, I said. Nicole came over to see what was up. Ah, it's usually locked, but it's open. Oh, just wait a moment. Before I could stop her, Nicole opened the drawer. Mom, what is this? She became visibly disturbed. I looked in as well and saw a divorce application with a handwritten letter, clearly my husband's handwriting with its unique quirks. When I picked it up, a photo slipped out. Dad, and who is this? Nicole asked. The photo showed Ethan with a woman and a boy about the same age as Nicole. On the back of the photo, along with a date, it read, with my beloved. Realizing the implication, I quickly understood. Nicole, possibly grasping the situation, looked up at me anxiously. Mom, does this mean Dad is cheating? It seems so, but this might actually be for the best. What? Nicole asked. Let's take this chance to clean the slate completely. I smiled at Nicole and gave her instructions to tidy up. After finishing the cleanup, we decided to leave our home, packing only the essentials and arranging for a moving company to handle the rest. We moved into a short-stay apartment while searching for a permanent place to live. That day, we submitted the divorce application to the city court. From that day on, Ethan felt like an ex-husband to me. I considered hiring a detective agency, but wanting to save money for the future, I decided to look for evidence of the affair myself. My ex-husband underestimated me as I found evidence quickly. A simple search of his name brought up his social media, documenting trips and daily life, but not with me as the partner. There were also many videos and photos left on his computer, perhaps to save space on his phone. It was undeniable proof of the affair. Based on this, I sought legal advice. Then, on the day my ex-husband was supposed to return from his business trip, I received a call. Hello? What the hell is this? He shouted. What do you mean? There's nothing left in the house. What did you do? You told me to tidy up. So I did what you asked. I tidied up, I said. Stop joking and come back. Where are you? Ethan demanded. I won't be returning. I'm divorcing you, I replied. What? Why? He asked, incredulous. You have the nerve to ask. Cheating and starting another family, and you don't know why. How did you find out? He stammered. You've been pretending to be on business trips. I've seen everything on your social media and computer. I even found out about the other home you have. All thanks to her parents, right? How? Ethan was clearly shocked to learn how much I knew. You were careless. You didn't think I would do something like this, did you? You'll struggle without me. How will you manage financially? A woman like you can't survive on her own, he sneered. Maybe, but it's better than staying with an abusive husband like you. I'll be taking compensation and child support from you. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on. Goodbye. I hung up. My ex-husband tried calling several times, but I blocked him. Even my mother-in-law reached out. A good wife forgives her husband's affairs. Don't make such a fuss and come back home. Forgive an affair and abuse? With a son about my daughter's age? I can't do that. I won't be in contact with you or let you see my daughter. That's ridiculous. Even if you divorce, she's still my granddaughter. You can't take her away. This is also what my daughter wants. She suffered because of her father and doesn't want to see you either. That's absurd. Goodbye. I continued to block calls from her, feeling relieved to be rid of unnecessary burdens. I found a modest apartment for our next home and moved her belongings there. Despite using a significant portion of my funds, I felt relieved about starting anew. After moving, I initiated claims for compensation against my ex-husband, initially resistant. When I mentioned returning to my previous job, which was also his workplace, he quickly signed the documents. Please don't do that. It'll ruin my reputation, he pleaded. My previous workplace was also my ex-husband's. He must have realized it was only a matter of time before it became known. He signed out of self-preservation, agreeing to a lump sum payment. Then, through the lawyer, the mistress requested to meet. It seems she's quite remorseful and wants to apologize in person. Persuaded by the lawyer's words, I agreed to meet. I chose a cafe as the meeting place. The woman who appeared was well-dressed and beautiful. Nice to meet you. My name is Tracy Brown. I sincerely apologize for the trouble I've caused, she said. Nice to meet you, I replied. An awkward silence filled the air. I had no intention of forgiving her, but I was curious about her side of the story. She began to speak slowly, revealing that she initially thought he was single. When she discovered she was pregnant, Ethan confessed he was married but promised a swift divorce. However, soon after, my pregnancy came to light, and he told her a divorce was no longer possible. Her parents suggested she could still have a family with him, and she accepted their proposal. In reality, we were not divorced, and the marriage registration we submitted was never processed. So you've been with my husband for over 12 years? I asked. Yes, he had told me he divorced 10 years ago, but I continued the relationship for 3 years even after knowing about you. I am truly sorry. Now I've decided to end things with Ethan. I loved him, but I've realized I was just convenient for him. How so? The moment he knew you found out, he started treating me like a cash cow. My parents are quite generous with me, their only child, and he depended on that. Our life was largely supported by my parents, and his lies became unforgivable. I see. And this is the compensation for my parents. She handed me a white envelope. I silently accepted it. She apologized until the end and then left. Perhaps she too was fooled by a foolish man. Afterwards, my daughter and I started a new life. When I explained my situation to my part-time job, they offered me a full-time position. Nicole no longer had to tiptoe around an adult's mood at home and seemed to smile more. I too have begun to feel more at peace. What would you like for dinner tonight? I asked. I want an omelette, Nicole replied. Great idea. With ketchup then. All right, love you, Mom. Love you, Nicole. We spent the evening laughing together, planning to live for each other's happiness moving forward. Hello guys, my name is Michelle, and I'm here to tell you my story. I'm only 28 years old, but I've already been through a lot because of my mother-in-law. This story is about the time she tried to kick me out of my own house. It happened last year, and we're still dealing with the consequences. I'm a small business owner, and I've been married to Logan for 2 years. We met in college when I was 20. Logan is one of the kindest and most caring people I know. His friends also love him for his helpful and caring nature. I used to be very lonely in college, so finding Logan was like a dream come true. My own toxic family made me believe I could never succeed in life. I got into my dream college on a scholarship, but I still had to work 2 jobs to cover my expenses. Logan supported me throughout my college life and encouraged me to start my own business. While he was an amazing boyfriend, there was one problem. His mother, Kate. Logan's parents were divorced long before I met him. However, Logan had a good relationship with both his parents, especially his mom. He always said, "You know what, Michelle? Even though my parents are divorced, I love them both equally. My mom is especially important to me." I responded, "I know, Logan. It makes me happy to see that your family loves you so much. It makes me miss my parents even more." Logan continued, "A few of my past girlfriends had a problem with me being so close to my mom. They've had many issues with her. I just want you to know that she's important to me as well." I have no idea why they had a problem with your mom. She seems like a great mother and a good person. I mean, she raised you and you turned out so well. Don't worry, I'll try to have a good relationship with her, I reassured him. Back then, I thought it was extremely sweet of Logan to look after his mom. When he joined his father's business, he started sending Kate money. He was generous with his family, which I adored. He was equally caring towards me, but I always insisted on splitting bills evenly. We moved in together at the end of my final year at his insistence. Things were going really smoothly until it was time to meet his family. I had already met his sister, who flew down to see us during spring break. From the moment I met her, I knew we would be best friends. She was just as sweet as her brother and stayed connected with me through social media. I met his mother and father when they came to his graduation. His father, Robert, gave me a big hug and was genuinely excited to meet me. His mother, Kate, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She barely acknowledged me and kept calling me Logan's friend. I tried to make small talk with her, but she simply looked in the other direction. When we were alone, she actually told me that she thought our relationship was temporary. Kate was convinced that Logan would break up with me after joining his father's business. She said, "I don't know why Logan is making such a fuss about you. It's not like you two will last forever. Looking at you, he can make do with a girl like you until he joins the business. After that, he will need someone more suitable." Kate, What are you saying? Logan and I are very serious. We're actually thinking about getting engaged. I love your son, and he loves me too, I said. Oh, please, don't give me that. I know you are nothing but a gold digger. I've met a lot of trash like you. You should ask me how I chased them away from Logan, she retorted. Kate, you are misunderstanding me. I'm not with Logan for his money. I tried to explain. Kate interrupted me and went on a tirade about how I was a witch and didn't deserve Logan. The amount of venom and nonchalance she showed honestly surprised me. I tried to ignore her words and put on a happy face for my boyfriend. But inside, I was thinking about whether I should have a talk with Logan about his mother. When we returned home, Logan enthusiastically asked, "So what do you think about my parents? Have you guys gotten along?" "Your dad is an amazing man, Logan. You saw how we bonded quickly. I can see where you got your kindness from." "And what about Mom? I saw you two were talking privately. You must have hit it off instantly." I didn't want Logan to worry, so I told him Kate and I were good. He seemed satisfied with my answer and didn't press further. Eventually, days passed and Logan joined the business. He often went to visit his mother and asked me to accompany him, but I was uneasy after our last meeting and refused. That year, during Christmas, I unexpectedly got an invite from his mother. They were going to have a grand celebration with all his extended family. Logan seemed pretty excited and told me I should come. Since Kate sent me the invite, I thought she might have changed her mind about me. Now I know that I was extremely foolish to think so. We excitedly visited Kate and prepared ourselves to meet the guests. Kate ignored me the entire time and even made some rude comments. When I met Logan's grandmother, she praised me and said, "My grandson has chosen quite well. You are a delightful girl, Kate. I've heard a lot about you from my grandchildren. I know you have a successful business that you started from scratch. You're an inspiration for your peers out there." "Thank you, Grandma. Your grandson really helped me a lot as well. He is the reason why I have so much confidence in my business." "You mean how my son gave you money to start your business, right? I know you struggled to make ends meet in college. I wonder how much my son gave you for your business. Your parents bailed on you, so you decided that my son would be a good financial replacement." "Kate, what is wrong with you? Michelle is successful because of her own efforts," Logan's grandmother interjected. "I think you were mistaken, Kate. Logan only gave me a small loan when I started. I paid him back the entire loan a few months after opening my business. My family wasn't very supportive, so I had to cut them out of my life. I am with Logan because I love him and nothing else." "That's what all gold diggers say, Michelle. I'm starting to understand why your family abandoned you for good. It would be a shame for anyone to be related to a gold digger like you." I was on the verge of crying and had to excuse myself from the party. Logan found me crying on the porch after some time. He profusely apologized for his mother's behavior and asked me to forgive him. Even his grandmother came outside and comforted me. Kate was inside the house, screaming about how I ruined her Christmas party. Logan's grandmother quickly went back and started berating her for being so mean to me. That shut her up very quickly. I did not want to go back inside. Logan pleaded with me, "Michelle, please let's just go back inside. Please forget what happened. I don't know what has gotten into Mom. I can assure you she won't say anything else, and if she does, I will stop her." "Fine. I will go back inside. But understand this, Logan. I'm going back for you. I don't want to ruin your day." "I know, Michelle. I'm so sorry for everything. Let's go in, and we'll leave early to make it up to you." Since that day, Kate became even more bitter towards me. Logan tried his best to maintain peace, but she refused to be civil with me at all. Sherry even called me to say that Kate was the reason she didn't go to the party. She said, "I saw this coming long ago, Michelle. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Mom has always favored Logan and neglected me because I'm a girl. I tried my best to gain Kate's love but gave up after suffering for years." "That's horrible, Sherry. I had no idea Kate was such a bad mother to you. Is this why you don't talk to her that much?" "Yes, Michelle. I have no interest in talking to Mom. I am genuinely happier being away from her. I should warn you, though, Logan is a good man, but he tends to be too soft on Mom and her toxic behavior." Sherry's story stayed with me for a long time. It even made me question my relationship with Logan, but I loved him too much to leave. I had no one, and Logan was the best thing that ever happened to me. So when Logan surprised me and proposed, I said yes. At that point, I knew that no matter what, I would always be by his side. We called his family to tell them about the engagement. Everyone was super happy except Kate. She congratulated us but quickly ended the call. Charlotte then called to tell us that Kate had gone ballistic over the news. She said, "I have some bad news for you guys. Mom has absolutely lost it after you announced your engagement. She's calling up every family member, spreading lies about Michelle's character. She wants everyone to pressure Logan into breaking the engagement." "What are you talking about, Sherry? We spoke to her just yesterday. She didn't say anything to me." "Why would she, Logan? She knows you won't listen to her right now, so she's bringing people to her side. Now everyone in your family thinks I'm a horrible woman. I'm pretty shocked by Mom's behavior and don't know what to do, but I'll stand up for you, Michelle. You're going to be my wife. I'll do my best to protect you." Our engagement was almost spoiled by Kate as she tried to get everyone against us. Thankfully, no one paid heed to her and actually supported us instead. Logan was crushed and tried to talk some sense into his mother. He visited her every day and tried to tell her how happy he was with me, but everything fell on deaf ears. She cried and screamed about how he doesn't love her and wants to marry a gold digger. I was getting annoyed by her constant taunting. Finally, Logan and I sat down to discuss what we should do about Kate. "Logan, your mom's behavior is seriously wearing me down. I just can't take it anymore. Sooner or later, you will have to do something about this," I said. "I'm so sorry, Michelle. I'm apologizing on her behalf. I promise that I will distance myself from her. She is my mom, so I don't want to cut her off," Logan replied. "I understand, Logan. Kate might be nasty to me, but you can't just let her go. However, we need to go low contact for a while." Logan then talked to his mom about our decision. Thankfully, Kate stayed away from all wedding preparations. However, she was busy telling everyone how bad I was and how her son was a lost cause. I tried my best to focus on the wedding and ignore Kate's malicious actions. She did everything from threatening to boycott the wedding to showing up at Logan's office to cause a scene. When nothing worked, she set her sights on our wedding. She called up our venue and canceled the date, pretending to be me. The venue, unfortunately, went along with it and canceled the booking. We tried our best to negotiate with them, but they refused to give back our deposit. They were willing to refund the money only if we pressed charges against Kate for impersonating me. Logan, as usual, did not want this to happen. He said, "Please, Michelle, don't make me file a report against Mom. I can do that. You have to understand." "What about the venue, Logan? We literally lost money. I don't have a place to get married," I replied, frustrated. "I'll fully pay for a new venue, completely on my dime. I don't want you to lose any more money than you already have. We may have to book a smaller venue because of the money, but I promise you this won't happen again." "Fine, but you need to talk to Kate about her behavior. I don't want any more drama. I've lost enough money and energy because of her." I was extremely upset and wanted to scream at Kate. Logan promised to handle the situation and dealt with Kate on his own. After this incident, we put passwords on all our vendors. Robert took pity on us and actually covered the cost of the cake as a wedding gift. We were thankful because we had just put down a deposit on a house and didn't have much spare money on hand. At our wedding, Kate sat in the front row and cried the entire time. No one paid attention to her, and the ceremony continued. We actually requested the priest to omit the objection part because we knew she would cause trouble. Sherry was a great support throughout all this. Sherry later told us, "You know what, guys? You were right. Mom was looking forward to making an objection. She was so pissed when that part didn't come. You should have seen her face." "How does she know about this, Sherry?" "I was genuinely hoping this hadn't crossed her mind," I said. "She told me at the reception. I guess she somehow thought I would support her. I mean, you do remember what happened at the reception, right?" At the reception, all she did was drink and cry at the bar. She even flagged down Robert and cried to him about losing her son. By the end of the day, I was exhausted by everything and honestly felt like the day was spoiled. Logan also looked pretty embarrassed and kept apologizing to me. A few months after the wedding, we shifted to our new house. Since we lost a lot of money on the first venue, we never got a honeymoon nor a housewarming party. However, we were happy to finally get married and own the house. One day, we were home after work and Logan told me that Kate had fallen down the stairs at her apartment. She apparently had a sprained ankle and needed someone to help. Logan informed me that he told Kate she could stay with us until she got better. I was again pissed because he didn't even consult me before making the decision. He didn't even hear my side and rushed to get Kate from her apartment. I prepared the guest room, feeling defeated and hurt. When Kate came to her house, she immediately started to cry about how Logan was spending too much money on me and forgetting his duty towards her. She said, "I can't believe how fast you abandoned me. This woman has you under her spell. First, you pay for her business, then the wedding, and now you gifted her a house. You spent so much on this cheap woman while your mother is living in a small apartment. How are you not ashamed?" "Mom, we paid for everything together. All expenses for the wedding and the house were split equally. This is why we're both on the deed of this house. I didn't pay Michelle's part. She can earn for herself," Logan explained. "Oh my God, you've even got her name on the house. She's going to ruin you, Logan. This house is yours, not hers. Michelle is going to divorce you and take all your assets." "Mom, what are you saying? That is not going to happen. Please stop insulting Michelle for no reason." Kate went on blabbering about how gold diggers like me cheat on their husbands and take all their money. Logan and I ignored her words and concentrated on settling her in the guest room. She again complained about how she should be in the master bedroom and that it was the least we could do for her. Logan just looked defeated and kept his eyes down the entire time. He begged me to behave and just put up with Kate for a few days. One thing I noticed was that she was not walking like she had a sprained ankle. When I informed Sherry of the matter, she was suspicious of Kate as well. She told me to keep an eye on her since she had faked injuries in the past. Kate was already whining about how I should be cooking her meals and pampering her. She knew I had work but was convinced that all I did was sit on my butt. After 2 days of putting up with her antics, I finally caught her casually walking down the stairs like nothing happened. I accessed our security camera from the living room and found more proof that she was faking her injury. I patiently waited for Logan to come home and confronted her with the evidence. When Logan saw the footage, he was super angry. He confronted Kate and asked her to explain. She was already in tears and said, "Logan, how could you doubt me like that? You know I am in pain. I can't even move a few steps without falling. My ankle is swollen, and I'm taking pain medications every day. That witch is manipulating you, Logan. Why would I lie about something like this? Kate, we can clearly see you moving around the house when I'm working. Your legs seem to work fine when we're not looking. There's no need to keep lying about this. How dare you accuse me of lying? I'm not a lowlife like you. My son loves me more than you anyway. I have no reason to lie. You're just jealous he is paying more attention to me. Logan, do something about her." "Mom, I am having a really hard time believing you right now. You already pulled this stunt before. Why did you lie to me about the injury? You have to believe me, Logan. I need your help. Your witch of a wife just wants me away from you. If you are seriously injured, why didn't you go to a doctor? Where are your doctor's notes? I'm scared of hospitals, so I couldn't go, but my ankle is really sprained. I'm telling you the truth." "Well, in that case, why don't we go to a doctor and get it checked? If you really are in pain, we need to get a test done on your leg anyway." At this point, Kate started to hyperventilate and cry. She kept screaming at me for being a scheming witch and begged Logan to listen to her. Logan just kept his head in his hands and said, "Mom, I love you, but what you are doing is very disturbing. I thought I could trust you. Why did you do this?" "I'm telling you the truth, Logan. This girl has destroyed our relationship since she came. You used to be so doting and caring towards me. Now you're accusing me of faking my injury. You don't love me anymore. I'm your mother. You should be taking care of me. You have to choose between her and me. Think wisely if you don't want to lose your mom." "What are you saying? I can't do that. I'm never going to see your face again if you don't divorce this witch. She is a snake, and that is exactly why her family abandoned her. You're wasting your time on a gold digger who doesn't love you. She is just using you for money. She can't stand that you give me money, so she wants me out of your life. You need to get rid of her before she traps you with a baby. You need to decide today, Logan." Kate went on and on about how I deserve to be mistreated by my family. She said so many hurtful things that I started to cry. I couldn't take it anymore. Logan looked at both of us and then rose from the couch. He went upstairs and returned with packed suitcases. When she saw this, Kate started to smirk at me. I was too upset to even look at Logan. When Logan finally reached us, I saw that he was carrying Kate's bags instead of mine. Kate looked shocked and started to sob. Logan simply said, "Mom, for years I've seen how you've treated Michelle. I kept quiet because I didn't want to lose you. I told Michelle to put up with you. You kept calling her names and even tried to sabotage our wedding. Still, I thought you would change and accept her as your daughter-in-law. Clearly, I was wrong. Logan, I only wanted the best for you. You have to understand that Michelle's plan is working against us. I'm your mother. You cannot kick me out. Enough, Mom. Michelle has already been through enough. You attacked her character and achievements. You were cruel enough to talk about her family. I had enough. I'm done with you. Take your bags and get out. Logan, you can't do this. I am ashamed I hadn't stood up for Michelle for so long, but I'm going to fix this now. She is my future, not my manipulative mother who destroys my relationships. Get out and don't come back here. Kate kept sobbing and clung to Logan for dear life, but he paid her no heed. He simply removed her from his arms and escorted her out. He came back and comforted me because I was still crying. Logan profusely apologized to me and promised that things would change. I was just mad at him because he had never kept his promise before. After Kate left, Logan spent the next few weeks making it up to me. He blocked Kate and everyone who tried to advocate for her. Robert called him and gave him a stern scolding for letting Kate hurt me for so long. Sherry was also pretty angry with Logan. He slowly realized how he had been pushing others away to accommodate Kate. He had to undo a lot of damage that Kate had caused in his life. We both started going to personal and couples therapy. He has come to recognize that Kate is a narcissist and only wanted control over him. Our relationship has improved a lot, and we are happier than ever. Hopefully, Kate will stay away from us. Logan is contemplating a restraining order if she doesn't. All in all, things are good and we are finally happy.
When my sister Emily saw me at the airport, she raised an eyebrow and said, "I wish you'd come to my wedding." She sounded sarcastic for a reason. Emily had said she was having a baby with my husband, Bob, and had left me for him. She must have felt pretty good about herself being married to a pilot. Plus, she had taken him away from me after we argued while living together. She must have felt really superior. To make it worse, Emily and Bob were planning a big wedding and bragging about moving abroad. Right now, she was waiting for her flight to go abroad to check out places to live. She looked really happy with her big suitcase and duffel bag. But I arrived at the airport with just a little luggage, ready to go home whenever. I dressed lightly on purpose and told her about my business over the phone. She probably wanted to see me upset, but I wasn't just going to stand there and take it. I knew Bob much better than she did. So, pretending not to know what was going on, I gave Emily an envelope with some important information and said, "Here, you forgot this. My name is Jennifer Thompson. I'm 40 years old, from a coastal area, and I'm a housewife married to a pilot. We don't have any kids, just the two of us. Bob is 47, and we met on a group date set up by friends. At that time, I'd just moved to New York in my mid-20s, not really thinking about settling down. I went on these group dates to meet more people, thinking it would increase my chances of finding a happy relationship. I never believed in love at first sight. When I dated, I cared more about someone's personality than their looks. But I did have a soft spot for persistence. When I first met Bob, I thought he was a bit of a charmer, always making jokes and seeming laid back. But sometimes I felt like he had other motives behind his actions. I thought I could just brush him off after our first meeting. But life surprised me. Bob kept pursuing me until I gave in. We went out for dinner, and before I knew it, we were dating. Now, we've been married for over 10 years. My old friends often joke, saying they never thought I'd settle down with someone like Bob, and maybe they're right. True to my initial impression, Bob had been seeing other women before we got married. Whenever I confronted him, he'd say I was the only one he loved, deflecting my accusations. I wasn't too keen on dating, so I just asked him to stop cheating and let it go. Despite the infidelity, our relationship was mostly good. Bob always made sure to celebrate our anniversaries and birthdays, and he even helped with chores without being asked. I enjoy cooking, so it wasn't a big deal, and he often did the dishes. It could work for the cheating. I'd say I landed a great guy. So when he proposed, I felt like the good outweighed the bad, and I said yes. Of course, I made it clear that cheating had to stop after we tied the knot. Thanks to Bob's pilot salary, our wedding was pretty grand. He spared no expense, getting me all the expensive dresses I wanted, and the food and cake were top-notch. It was a luxurious affair, and my family was thrilled. I remember being so happy, but my sister Emily kept saying, "Jen, I'm so jealous," as she looked at me in my glamorous dress, her own dreams of a big wedding growing. Not long after our joyous wedding, Bob started cheating again. Our downtown apartment was home to many rumors, and I often heard gossip from nosy neighbors about seeing Bob with other women. Whenever I heard these rumors, I'd line up air fresheners at the front door, hoping Bob would confess. Even when he did admit it, he never stopped. I don't really expect him to change at this point, and oddly, I've never felt the urge to divorce him. I don't know if that's good or bad, but for now, I just keep saying, "Please don't cheat anymore." It's almost become a catchphrase. One summer, as I waved goodbye to Bob and did the laundry, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was too early for a delivery, so I was curious about who it could be. When I checked the intercom, there stood a large suitcase, and my younger sister Emily was on the screen. "I'll be right there," I quickly said, hurrying to finish up the laundry. Even though Emily's my sister, I didn't want her to see the mess of my daily life. Emily and I have a big age difference. I'm 40, and she's 27, which is 13 years apart. Our relationship feels more like aunt and niece than siblings. After finishing the laundry, I opened the door to welcome Emily inside. "What brings you here, especially with such a large suitcase?" I asked. She explained that she had to leave her place after quitting her job because she couldn't pay rent. Last October, she was transferred to a different department at work, where her female supervisor treated her terribly. The supervisor was always cold to Emily, scolding her for being slow, even though she worked hard. Recently, they had stopped giving her tasks altogether. Emily tried to request a transfer, but the HR department wouldn't allow it, so she ended up resigning. I remembered how excited she was when she first got the job offer in New York. Now, after more than 4 years, she left due to office politics. Although I felt a bit sympathetic, it seemed unusual for someone like Emily, who's usually favored by older colleagues, to experience this. Well, there are all kinds of people out there, I reasoned. I was so done with that company. I quit on my own terms. She left her job at the end of May, and since she had no savings, she couldn't afford her rent and was evicted. I couldn't help but wonder how she managed to have no savings at all. Maybe she spent too much on expensive cosmetics or designer brands. Ever since we were kids, she's had this impulsive streak, always acting without thinking things through. I'm honestly surprised that she hasn't grown out of it. You really should start taking responsibility for your actions. I thought to myself, so what are you gonna do now? I asked her if she had nowhere to live. She might need to return to our family home or look for a job that offers dormitory accommodation. There must be many things that needed to be done. She seemed unprepared and hadn't even started looking for a new job. As her older sister, I felt responsible for giving her advice. As I pondered the situation, Emily asked, "Can I stay here for a while?" The thought of living with my younger sister at this age never crossed my mind, and I was quite taken aback. Certainly, staying in this house would allow her to remain in the city without having to return to our family home. If she went back home, she'd face our parents' questions, and more than anything, if she wanted to continue her life in New York, staying away from our hometown would be the most logical choice. However, it wasn't solely my decision to make. I had to wait for Bob to return. Honestly, I wish she would try to sort things out on her own for once, I expressed. When Bob returned and heard Emily's story, he agreed without hesitation. Although I wasn't keen on the idea, I swallowed my words, feeling I had to accept it since Bob agreed. I decided to let Emily use the guest room meant for unexpected visitors and led her there. And so, life for the three of us, myself, Bob, and Emily, began. Even though Emily was staying with us, she willingly helped with meals and house chores. However, oddly enough, she made no apparent efforts to find a new job. It's problematic if she thinks she can live with us indefinitely with no savings of her own. It would mean that Bob and would have to support her financially. I worried. Whenever I asked Emily if she found a job yet, she gave vague answers. When Bob was away for work, my once free time started feeling increasingly intruded by Emily's presence. Having someone else around during my me time felt more invasive than I'd imagined. There was always the sense of another person, the need for small talk. It just wasn't relaxing. In terms of chores, I could tolerate making more food since I loved cooking. But for everything else, the added work for an extra person felt burdensome. Sometimes, when checking the guest room, I found her lazily watching videos online or munching on snacks. Her lazy attitude became more evident. She stopped helping around the house recently, and my patience was wearing thin. It would be a month since Emily started living with us, and her lack of effort in job hunting pushed me to the edge. I knocked on her door and confronted her with a stern tone. "When are you gonna start working?" Without turning away from the movie she was watching, Emily replied, "I know." "Okay," while stuffing another snack into her mouth. At that moment, something inside me snapped. "Why don't you at least show some effort?" I burst out, surprised by my outburst. Emily paused her movie and looked at me. "You need to straighten up. This isn't your house," I asserted, unable to hold back. I poured out all my frustrations that had built up over the month. After venting, I felt a bit guilty for not being more composed, but that feeling quickly vanished with Emily's next words. "Told you, I know. You're the older sister, so you should be taking care of me," she retorted. Wondering why I had to care for my grown-up sister, I tried to continue our argument, but I decided to take a deep breath instead. I had always known Emily to be selfish, but it seemed she'd gotten worse with age. Thinking there was no point talking to her, I softly told her, "If you're just gonna laze around, you should leave," and then left the room. After that, Emily's lazy tendencies escalated. She started treating the guest room as her own, eating snacks I bought without permission, leaving trash everywhere, and not cleaning up her clothes or other belongings. Every time I saw her lazy behavior, I'd tell her, "Enough's enough," but she'd just respond with, "Oh, come on," leading to countless arguments. I was getting fed up with this stressful living situation. Then, while at the supermarket, I ran into our neighbor, Mrs. Roberts, who told me something unbelievable. "Hey, I saw your husband Bob and your sister Emily downtown last Sunday," she said. I found it odd to hear that Emily went out, but as I waited for Mrs. Roberts to continue, she leaned in closer and whispered, "They seemed really close." As I was wondering why someone would pay such close attention, Mrs. Roberts spoke a shocking statement. "I think they might be involved in a romantic relationship." Initially, I thought to take the gossip-loving Mrs. Roberts' words with a grain of salt, but the certainty in her voice was unsettling. For the moment, I brushed it off with a smile, saying, "Thank you for letting me know," and parted ways with her. Regardless of Bob being a philanderer, he should know better than to get involved with his wife's sister. Although I wanted to take it with a grain of salt, the certainty in her voice bothered me. I just thanked her for the info and parted ways, thinking Bob would surely know better than to cross such a line. Some days later, while getting the mail, another neighbor, Mrs. Smith, mentioned, "Bob and Emily went for a drive yesterday. It seems they get along really well." Mrs. Smith, unlike Mrs. Roberts, didn't seem interested in probing into a romantic relationship between them, but rather wanted to discuss the warmth of family ties. She wore a gentle smile on her face. However, yesterday I was out meeting a friend, and Bob was typically at work, so Emily should have been home alone. But Mrs. Smith must have recognized Bob's car and probably did witness them together. I thanked Mrs. Smith briefly and quickly returned to my room. I called the two of them to the living room, took a deep breath, and calmly asked, "Did you two go out together yesterday?" Bob, without showing any sign of embarrassment, simply responded, "Yeah, we did. I took Emily to the job center. You wanted Jennifer to start working soon, didn't you?" Following Bob's comment, Emily added in a matching tone, "Yeah, he just gave me a ride." I decided not to press the issue further and brought up what Mrs. Roberts had mentioned. "By the way, a neighbor mentioned you two seem quite close. Is that so?" Hearing that, Bob crossed his arms and replied, "What's that about? She's my wife's sister, of course. I'd be kind to her." He then showed a somewhat annoyed attitude and asked, "Is that all?" before retreating to his own room. Casting a quick glance towards Emily, she awkwardly turned her face away and headed back to her guest room. I felt something was off, but I couldn't gather any further information from them. Days went by, and I had to endure Emily's lazy attitude, who showed no interest in finding a job and seemed too comfortable in our home. Getting tired of arguing with her and urging her to work, I kept our conversations minimal and tried not to interact much. I wonder if everything seemed calm on the surface. After about 2 years, while I was preparing to go shopping in my room, Emily suddenly called me to the living room. She looked somewhat proud, and I thought she was about to announce her new job. Instead, she had me sit on the sofa and dropped the bombshell. "I'm pregnant." Confused, I asked, "Pregnant? What do you mean?" She replied, "I mean I'm carrying Bob's child." The shock was equivalent to a slap on the face. I recalled what Mrs. Roberts had said 2 years ago. I couldn't believe my sister and my husband had an affair. Seeing my disturbed face, a smug Emily added, "Bob said he'll marry me," then looked down on me triumphantly and declared, "Bob is mine." That evening, when Bob returned, I demanded an explanation. He showed sincere apology and expressed his desire to raise the child. A part of me wished for a denial, but Bob's response confirmed the bitter truth, and I struggled to accept it. That night, I couldn't stop pondering our next steps, feeling that tomorrow's me might have an answer. I decided to sleep early. The next day, waking up early, I started browsing on my computer. I researched the possible settlement I could claim in case of divorce due to their betrayal and about the apartment we had purchased together. The mere idea of him being with another woman was intolerable, let alone getting my sister pregnant. Divorce seemed the only option, and I was determined. From my research, it appeared that our district accepted digital divorce transactions. So I downloaded the form on my phone and went to a local store to print it out. As I was leaving, I felt Emily's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. After getting my errand done, I locked myself in my room. I started filling out divorce papers. Considering he expressed the desire to raise the child, it was clear he wanted a divorce. A court case seemed unnecessary. A simple mutual agreement would do. I listed down my terms and, holding the completed divorce papers, knocked on Bob's door. Upon recognizing me, he opened the door immediately. He agreed to the divorce, paying a one-time settlement of $30,000 and to sell the apartment we had bought together. While I wondered how he and Emily planned to support themselves, I found it absurd to sympathize with the two betrayers. I stuck to my terms and made sure they paid in full. Once the apartment sale was over, we started our separate lives. However, it wasn't long before I received a snarky call from Emily. "We're gonna have a wedding even more extravagant than what you had. Just the two of us," she said excitedly. I couldn't care less, but I still responded, "Well, good for you. We're even planning to move abroad. Emily said over the phone, her voice brimming with excitement. She must feel pretty good about taking him away from me. They were about to go on a trip abroad, partly to scout for potential places to relocate. I couldn't help but wonder what Emily knows about Bob, her fiancé, especially since he was actually laid off 2 months before Emily announced her pregnancy. Bob and I had some savings at the time, so I didn't feel the need to tell Emily, and it seems that Bob probably hadn't told her either. The reason for his termination: an affair. He was caught red-handed with a married flight attendant, and he had to pay a hefty settlement to her husband. On top of that, he's also paying me settlement, so I'm pretty sure his savings are nearly depleted. Life is unpredictable, and my decision to let things slide may just come back to haunt Emily and Bob. Emily, in her ignorance, keeps gloating on the phone. When she tells me they're leaving for a trip abroad the day after tomorrow, I say, "All right, I'll drop off some luggage you left behind," and hang up. On the day of their departure, I make my way to the airport, looking for Emily. I find her sitting alone in front of an airport cafe. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Jennifer, why didn't you come to my wedding?" Her voice tinged with spite. Ignoring her, I get straight to the point. "Here, this is from Bob," I say, handing her an envelope. Emily's face turns ashen as she reads the contents. "Your husband, Bob, is not just out of a job as a pilot, he's completely unemployed." Visibly shaking, she yells, "Stop lying." But I calmly reply, "He's probably nearly broke by now." After explaining everything to her, she screams, "I can't believe this," and storms off, drawing cold stares from the people around her. I really thought happiness could come easily. I mumbled to myself, feeling somewhat relieved. I left the airport and headed to my small restaurant in a city far removed from New York. After that, I used the settlement and the proceeds from selling the house to start a small diner in a town far from the city, capitalizing on my passion for cooking. Although I can't prepare gourmet dishes, my traditional American comfort food has been well received by the locals. On the other hand, Emily and Bob seem to be struggling quite a bit. Emily returned to our parents' home for childbirth, seeking help. However, she didn't raise the child and left the child at her parents' home, and now her whereabouts are unknown. It sounds like she can't bear living with our parents nagging, since they heard her situation in detail from me. Bob, denied access by my parents and unable to find work, still insists on paying child support. Whether she's lost touch with reality or genuinely cares about the child, her future seems fraught with challenges. It's uncertain if they're still together, but Bob hasn't yet met the child my parents are raising. Ironically, Bob had divorced me because he wanted kids. I've decided to steer clear of irresponsible people like them. I'm happy with my current life, and I plan to keep working hard to make my small restaurant a beloved part of the community. You thought you could marry my son, but you're not right for him. Our standards are different. Don't even think about joining our family. That's how meanly my father-in-law spoke to me, and my mother-in-law joined in too. They said I'd only approach Alex for money. My name is Kate. I'm 34, and I work for a company. I've been there since I finished university, while others left to start businesses, get married, or have kids. I stayed and worked hard every day. You might think I'm a lonely workaholic woman, but I'm not lonely because I have a boyfriend named Alex. He used to be my business partner, and I always saw him as a dedicated young man. After working together several times, we started to like each other, and he confessed his feelings for me. We've been dating for a few years now, and we're even engaged. But if you ask me if I'm worried about marrying him, I have to admit there are some concerns. He's younger than me, and I wonder if he'll be okay with me being older. Even though he says age doesn't matter, I still worry. Also, his father owns a business, and Alex works for him. Eventually, Alex will take over the company and become its president. I'm afraid his parents might not approve of our marriage. I've been anxious about it for a long time. Of course, I was thrilled when he asked me to marry him. But I wonder if we can really get married. However, Alex didn't seem to mind at all. His optimism was one of the things I found attractive about him. He had already met my parents, and we often had nice dinners together. My parents had already agreed that we were getting married, and they liked Alex very much. Finally, the day came to visit Alex's parents. For weeks, I had been so nervous about it. Their house was spectacular, just as I expected from where the president of the company lives. It was so grand that I felt like I was in a royal palace or something. Instantly, I started worrying if my clothes were suitable for this place. I had prepared some nice clothes for the occasion, but I wasn't sure if they were good enough. I come from a modest family, so it would be quite different compared to Alex's house. Alex often treated me to nice meals at fancy restaurants, and when we went on vacation, he would always book expensive hotel rooms. He thought those things were completely normal, but sometimes I felt like he lived in a different world from me. Even so, he never imposed his values on me, and he never bragged about being rich. I don't judge people by their money. I fell in love with you because of your personality and inner beauty. At first, I wondered why he was dating an older, attractive woman like me, but his sweet words made me believe that he genuinely liked me for who I am. In other words, because we love each other deeply, Alex and I are getting married. I think I've met a truly wonderful man, so I want his parents to approve of our marriage. Don't worry, babe. I've already told my parents about you. He tried to encourage me. Then the front door opened, and his mother welcomed us. Welcome, you must be Kate. Yes, I'm Kate. Nice to meet you, I replied. His mother gave me a quick nod and let us in. Inside, there was a huge living room, and Alex's father was waiting for us, sitting on a big, luxurious, fluffy sofa. I felt nervous all at once. Of course, I was nervous when I met his mother, but his father was even more intimidating, as you would expect from the president of a company. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Kate. Thank you for coming today, I said, my voice trembling. Alex looked at me and smiled. Don't be so nervous. But his parents weren't smiling at all. They were staring at me with very cold eyes. I could feel my spine stiffen. Please sit down, his father said, motioning to the sofa. It felt like a job interview. Well, no, excuse me, his father interjected the moment I sat down. His mother followed suit. Hey, Mom, Dad, what are you guys doing? What do you mean? No, it's rude to say such a thing. Alex interjected, trying to defend me, but his parents didn't seem to listen. How old are you anyway? You look pretty old to me, his mother remarked. I'm 34, I replied, feeling the weight of their judgment. Lord, she's 6 years older than Alex. How can we accept Alex marrying an older woman like you? His mother continued. And besides, it's already too late for you to have children, isn't it? We need someone who can give us grandchildren. As for me, I think it has to be a young woman, at least younger than Alex, his mother added. I knew they would mention my age, and you're still single at your age. I can't help but think you have some kind of problem. Maybe you're too difficult or have a bad personality. Something like that, his mother's sharp question exploded. Mom, what are you talking about? Kate is a wonderful person with a great personality. Alex interjected again. Then why hasn't she married before? His mother's sharp question cut through the tension. Excuse me, I know I'm a little older to be married, but I love my job, and I wanted to work harder. I've always prioritized my work over marriage. That's why I didn't get married until I reached this age. It wasn't until I met Alex that I realized I wanted to get married. Tried my best to explain, feeling almost overwhelmed by the pressure from his parents. My words, but his parents' attitude didn't change at all. Wouldn't working harder be better? It's not like the company you work for is a big one. Even if you work hard and get promoted, you don't get paid much, do you? I think you should focus more on making yourself more attractive as a woman. You know, it would be nice if you got. Yes. Even at your age, you can still look a little better. Maybe some plastic surgery would help, his mother suggested, her words cutting through me. Honey, that's too straightforward, his father chuckled, and for the first time, I saw them laugh, but it was at our expense. I was so shocked and angry. I didn't know what to say. You thought you could marry my son. Your standard doesn't match ours. Don't you dare dream of joining us. Anyway, the point is, you were not the right person for my son. Now, leave. His father-in-law spoke to me coldly. My mother-in-law chimed in. You would have approached Alex for money anyway. I don't know how you fooled my son, but you can't fool us too. That's enough. You guys can say whatever the hell you want, but it's my life. I'm gonna decide who I'm marrying. Alex tried to defend me, but I stopped him. I see. I understand how you feel, but it's quite impolite of you to say such horrible things to me, despite the fact that we just met. I don't care if you're richer or not. It's not important to me. But if I were to become rich, I definitely do not want to be like you, I said firmly as I stood up. We don't need to have any more conversations, I declared, heading towards the door to leave his parents' house. You've got to be kidding me. Don't you dare insult us, you beggar. We will never allow you to marry my son. I don't want to be related to people like you anyway. His father spat back at me angrily. You're such a disgraceful person. I'd like to see the face of the parents who've raised a woman like you. His father continued to berate me, but I ignored him and left their house. Their attitude was just too much. I walked outside in frustration, and then Alex came running up to me in a panic. Kate, I'm sorry. I never thought my parents would say something like that. I mean, it was a horrible thing to say, but maybe it's a good thing. It would have been a lot more pressure if we got married in that situation. Anyway, I'm leaving them. I'm not taking over Dad's company, and I'm quitting that company too, Alex confessed hurriedly. You shouldn't make such a decision in a rush, I cautioned him. I'm not. I really do love you, Kate. We didn't get together for money, so there should be no problem if I leave the house, Alex reassured me. Well, that's true, but I started to say, but he interrupted me. Let's go to your parents' house and tell them about this, he suggested, pulling my hand and starting to walk. My parents were surprised at our sudden visit, but they welcomed us warmly. While having tea, we told my parents about what happened. My father listened to us without saying a word. Alex, your father's company is called Space Sea, right? And your father's name is Patrick Smith? My father inquired. Yes, but why? That's what I thought. I see. Why don't we go with you to your parents' house now? My father suggested. Dad, what's going on? I asked, confused. Because they said they wanted to see her face, right? Let's go show them a face, then, shall we? My father replied, surprising me. My father isn't the type to provoke or anything like that, so I was surprised, but he seemed ready to go, so we had no choice. We ended up going to his parents' house again. This time, Alex's father answered the door, not the mother. You again. I won't forgive you no matter how many times you come back. Whose daughter do you think you were talking to, Patrick? Alex's father snapped, glaring at my father. It took him a few seconds to finally recognize something. Mr. Anderson, is that you? You finally remembered. Your daughter? That means her father is you. That's right. She's my only daughter. We had her later in our marriage. By the way, how dare you insult my precious daughter? Have you forgotten what I told you back then? For 3 years, no less. You see, when you were arrested for smoking and drinking, or even caught shoplifting, I covered for you and gave you your chance to become a better person, didn't I? I did all that I could do so that you could get a decent job. Didn't I teach you that no one can live alone and we all support each other? And yet, as soon as your company is successful, you forget all that, haven't you? My father scolded. I apologize for that. Alex's father replied, now seeming fragile, a complete change from what he was before. If you were to be the president of a company, you need to treat people with compassion. You think you're better than others because you were successful. Aren't you looking down on people when you shouldn't? My father continued. Well, that's... Alex's father seemed to struggle with his response. In that case, my boss always says his stomach hurts from stress, Dad. Are you harassing him? Alex interjected. What are you talking about? I'm just giving him a hard time because I expect better of him, Alex's father replied, starting to come unraveled. Just when I thought you'd finally come to your senses, you're back to your old self. You're a real pain in the ass. You know that, Patrick, my father criticized. First of all, I want you to apologize to my daughter before insulting her. Yes, I'm sorry, Kate. Alex's father apologized, bowing his head to me, as accused by my father. It seemed that the master-slave relationship ingrained in our bodies when we were students is a relationship that is difficult to change. Honey, you should apologize to her as well, Alex's mother added, bowing her head too. I was relieved that his parents apologized to me. Hey, I'm leaving this house, and I'm leaving the company too, Alex announced, and at that point, his parents were in a panic. Wait a minute. If you leave, who's going to take over? Your father's right. You're the only one we have left. His parents pleaded. I'm sick of you controlling me over everything. I'm going to start my own company and see how far I can go on my own. And I'll marry Kate as I promised. Thanks for everything, Alex said firmly, bowing his head to say goodbye to his parents. They were frozen, their faces turning completely pale, but we left them behind anyway. My father had been a high school teacher until his retirement. Had no idea that Alex's father was one of his students. I looked up the company Alex works for on their website, and Patrick's picture came up. At first, I was happy to see that a student of mine had achieved something great, but you can be sublimed by money, forgetting what's important. My father was a very dedicated teacher, and he was always strict about such things. After a while, Alex really quit his job and started his own business. I supported him as I continued working. Alex seemed to be talented being a business owner, and his company was making a profit at an early stage. And of course, we married and became husband and wife. We live with joy every day, supporting each other. As for my father-in-law, he was sued by some of his subordinates for power harassment. Since that caused the stock price to drop, he was dismissed from his position as president. After all, no matter how well things are going, I realize that humbleness and compassion are absolutely necessary. I have a role model as my father, and I will cherish everything he taught and try to live my life with dignity.